Here.
Councilmember Rohrbeck,
Here.
Councilmember Reddick,
Here.
Vice Mayor Brownstone,
Here.
Mayor Eisen.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right. Tonight we are going to be discussing the local coastal land use plan. We're going to be conducting a public hearing, and I want to just go through a few topics before we start this conversation. First of all, let me start off by saying this is the first of 2 scheduled public hearings on the 2020 local coastal land use plan update. Tonight's meeting was continued from yesterday, September 29th. I want to say off the bat that tonight's meeting is the culmination of 7 years of collaboration between members of the community, the General Plan Advisory Committee, which we are very thankful for participation, the Planning Commission, and staff to update our land use plan, or LUP, as you'll probably hear it referred to many times throughout the evening. I am encouraging everyone to be as positive as possible with their comments. Staff has put a lot of time and energy into this topic over many years. Council has put a lot of time and energy into this over many years, and all the committees I just mentioned. And as we go through this, tempers can flare, and we want to make sure to keep this if anybody saw the presidential debate last night, that is the opposite of what we are looking for. The city lies entirely in the coastal zone, and the LUP is the key planning document for the resource protection and development policies necessary to meet the requirements of the Coastal Act. If and when council approves the LUP, it will go to the Coastal Commission for certification. Now I'm going to give you a little explanation of the order of events and provide some reminders. Number 1, first we will have a staff presentation, which will include some remarks by the city attorney to ensure that we comply with conflict of interest rules. Second, staff will give an overview of the plan and highlight the changes that have been proposed along the way, including for city council consideration. Second, we will hold a public hearing. During the public hearing, each speaker will be given an opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes. Feel free to take less time if you want to. We will take a break after public comment. Third, we will ask staff to respond to comments raised during the public hearing. Next, council will begin its deliberations. No action is planned for tonight's meeting. Finally, council will continue the public hearing to their regular meeting on October 6, 2020 at 7 p.m. All right, so that gives you an understanding of what's going to happen. So contrary to quite a few emails we've received, I just want people to understand that there is yet another meeting where action will be taken. Tonight, again, is more about hearing from the public. We will now have staff presentations, which will be kicked off by Community Development Director Jill Ekus. And I just want to reiterate again, we're going to make sure that all comments coming from the community tonight remain civil. And we appreciate everybody's ability to follow these rules. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll move it over to Jill.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Oh, please.
I'd actually like the honor of introducing Jill on this.
Oh, even better.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to pause for a moment, take a breath. This is monumental. This is a monumental hearing. You made the comment in your opening remarks. It's been nearly 7 years that we've been working on this. This is a huge effort, a very important effort. And I've been lucky and privileged just to be here for the last 2. This started well before I was here, and I'm lucky enough to be here as your council and the community see it to the finish line. And so it's a privilege to be a part of that. But it is so big because this is a long-term planning document. It guides the community and what the community will be for the next 25 years. So with that, I just want to acknowledge the effort that's gone into it. I want to acknowledge specifically Jill and her staff. I want to acknowledge Catherine and her staff. I want to acknowledge your councils before you, communities before you, staff who have worked on this before Jill and Catherine. This is a big effort, and we're really proud to bring it to you and the community tonight. So with that, I wanted to introduce Jill. She has led this effort and has done just an amazing job with everyone, the community, the Planning Commission, everyone, to get it to this point. So with that now, Jill, please start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. That was, staff really appreciates the support that we have throughout the city on this project. And we'd like to just acknowledge and welcome everyone to this first of 2 scheduled public hearings on the local coastal land use plan. Mr. Mayor, Council, we see also that there are quite a few participants in your viewing room, a little bit over 40. We're really delighted to see that. We just always like to announce how many folks are present. That's something we've been doing with the Planning Commission, and it just helps during these times when we're in our Zoom room. To start, I'm going to kick off a little bit of context around conflict of interest, and then of course the rest of the instructions throughout the meeting will come from City Attorney Catherine Engberg. But in our kickoff, we note that you have been briefed, Council has been briefed about areas of potential conflict. Under the Political Reform Act, the Council can oversee general plan and local coastal program updates. However, if changes are proposed to land use designations or other policies affecting a specific parcel near property owned by a council member, that council member may need to recuse himself or herself from that part of the discussion and decision-making process. At the end of the staff presentation, the City Attorney will provide more specific direction on how we will be handling the deliberations to make sure each of you has an opportunity to recuse if necessary. And we take this very seriously, and we know that you do too, and we appreciate the time that you've spent in preparing for that. All right, now that we've overcome that little bunch, the planners want to focus on the planning. So tonight, the overview for this meeting, as the mayor noted, we will have a presentation on. There'll be time for council clarifying questions. Those are really not for deliberation, just really focused, quick questions for the good of the room in case things need to be cleared up. And then public comment is really the feature of the evening. We expect time for council deliberation. And then we always close with talking about next steps. Tonight, I'd like to start by talking about next steps. So we recognize that in the last couple of days, you've received quite a few emails from community members who are concerned about where we are in the process and have requested a number of different things about process points. And in fact, there seems to be a little bit of confusion about tonight, which was never noticed to be a decision-making meeting. So we're not sure where that information came out, but we just want to be very, very clear. We expect council to continue this item in some extent. So let's talk about those options briefly now, and then we can cover them in more detail at the end of the presentation. The first option presented here is what was in your staff report. Continuing the item to October 6th. And we have some a baseline of the Planning Commission's recommendation to you of a draft land use plan. You received that in your binders and it is posted on the city website. And staff has prepared some subsequent revisions for council's consideration. They were included in your staff report. They're attached as Exhibit A to the resolution. We want to remind everybody that staff recommendations, and we'll review all of them and the content of them, but they're not set in stone. This is always true for city council decision-making. You can accept staff recommendations. We would often expect council to amend items that come before them, especially something of this scope. Or you may just wish to proceed with the Planning Commission version of the document with no revisions. So we just want to remind everybody that there's a lot of flexibility here for City Council, and they have been studying the document and they are going to listen to public comment and they're going to learn more about these revisions and ask questions. Now, community members were asking about, could we have more time and could you consider referring the revisions back to the Planning Commission? We don't know if you will be interested in doing that or not, but we wanted to be prepared in case you are, and that is certainly an option for council. So if you were to do so, a timeline that we would recommend is to continue the item for council to November 17th, which would give us time to bring the revisions that you've guided us to compile back to Planning Commission in October. And so that sequence would work, and we can encourage everyone to continue to participate. We can put out more notices. So we can work with any process that works best for council. And with that unusual start of a meeting, and we will go back and have next steps available for you to continue at the end. But it's time for Brittany Cozzolino, our associate planner, who has been working tirelessly on this document she's going to give you an overview. We're going to do it pretty quickly tonight. We know you've seen this before, and this has also been presented to the Planning Commission several times. That said, we do want to cover it so that you have the context, and then she's going to turn it back to me, and I'll talk about the revisions that are of interest to you. All right, Brittany.
All right, thank you, Jill. Good evening, Council. I am thrilled to be here with you tonight. So Mayor Eisen covered this a bit already, but just a quick reminder why we're here. We all know how special and unique Half Moon Bay is. We're also one of very few cities in California that are entirely within the coastal zone. So the land use plan is a major planning document for our city, and it covers our entire jurisdiction. So the city implements the Coastal Act through our land use plan, and we specified the allowable kinds, types, and intensities of development that could occur in the city's jurisdiction through the land use plan. So the plan doesn't approve any development itself, but rather it guides how and where different types of development could occur. Our current land use plan was first written in 1985 and last updated in 1993, and was not effective until it was followed up with the implementation plan, or the zoning code, until 1996. So the 2020 land use plan update represents our re-examined and updated policy approach for carrying out the land use plan and guiding review of coastal development projects in a way that addresses changed conditions since 1996 and addresses new community priorities and anticipates future needs with a new planning horizon of 2040. The land use plan includes updated requirements to protect wetlands and riparian corridors and other sensitive habitat areas, protections and opportunities for public access to and along the shoreline, strategies for concentrating new growth in existing developed areas and ensuring adequate public services for new growth, and ways to protect and support agricultural lands. The updated land use plan also includes several new topics that were either not yet concerns or were otherwise not acknowledged in the 1996 land use plan, including climate change, sea level rise, and environmental justice. So, as is summarized in Appendix E of the land use plan, there's been extensive public engagement for the land use plan update since the process began in 2013. This process has been really significant for identifying community priorities and informing the land use plan policies. The General Plan Advisory Committee established these guiding principles shown on the screen here for the land use plan update and general plan update. And these have also been pillars for informing the land use plan policy decisions that are before you. So I'm going to quickly highlight the main themes and goals of each chapter. We apologize if you've heard this multiple times throughout our planning commission study sessions and recent hearings, but we always have new folks at the table with us. So quickly, the first chapter is a review of the history of land use planning in the city with an overview of existing conditions and changed circumstances since 1996. And it also brings forward the foundational policies of the 96 plan with a new foundational policy on environmental justice. Chapter 2 presents the city's land use map and provides a description and set of policies for each land use designation. Most of the housing and growth management strategies are found in this chapter, including provisions for affordable housing and planned developments, the workforce housing overlay, and upzoning opportunities in the town center. Chapter 3 considers the capacity of public works infrastructure and systems and the projected demand for Coastal Act priority, local priority, and non-priority uses over the planning horizon. And it considers strategies for the circulation system, including a focus on implementing the town boulevard and supporting lower trip generating uses. Chapter 4 includes protections for prime agricultural soils and supports the city's ag operations with additional land uses. It also expands farm worker housing options through the workforce housing overlay and provides support for expedited permitting and reduced permitting fees. Chapter 5 has the primary goal of ensuring coastal access and recreation opportunities, including with the lens of social equity and environmental justice. Updated maps and policies are consistent with the recently adopted Parks Master Plan and Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan. And the need for advanced multimodal options, alternative modes of transportation, and town boulevard improvements are emphasized. Chapter 6 includes policies to conserve and restore environmentally sensitive habitat areas, wetlands and water courses, and ways to improve coastal water quality and hydrology. The habitat maps have been updated in high resolution to reflect the city's current biological conditions. Chapter 7 addresses a range of environmental hazards that can occur in the city and how to minimize risk for development in those areas, including sea level rise and climate change, using policy guidance from the city's 2016 Sea Level Rise Vulnerability Assessment and the Coastal Commission Sea Level Rise Guidance document. Chapter 8 includes policies and updated mapping to protect cultural resources, and policies have been updated from the existing land use plan to reflect the Coastal Commission's recent tribal consultation policy guidance. And finally, Chapter 9 identifies visual resource areas throughout the city with updated mapping and updated policies that address community values, such as enhancement of dark night skies, protection of public views of the ocean and upland slopes, and improvement of visually degraded areas where feasible. There are a few appendices that provide a summary of amendments necessary to bring the implementation plan into conformance with the land use plan update that is before you. Additional information regarding the build out calculations and infrastructure modeling that you'll see in Chapter 3, Public Works. a summarized history of LCP amendments and CDP appeals, and the summary of public engagement that I mentioned earlier. And finally, we conclude with a glossary to define important terms and concepts and a list of acronyms that appear throughout the chapters. And I will turn it back to Jill to go over the revisions.
Thank you, Brittany. So part of council's packet was a set of revisions. We've already referred to them. We've also continued to prepare more. What's going on is that folks are commenting right up to the start of your meetings. This happened also with the Planning Commission, and we're trying to be very, very careful with reviewing all of the input that's received, in particular looking for comments that identify where we might have made a mistake, or we need to provide more clarity in the language, or an inconsistency. What we hang our hat on though here is the Planning Commission recommended the land use plan with modifications on September 8th. The modifications that were included in the recommendation are very clearly presented to you in two places. One, they are incorporated in the council version of the land use plan, and they are also provided in whole in your staff report for this meeting. From there, we've, as staff and the practice, the intent of our planning practice is to always be available to anyone who wishes to talk about planning for this city. And so we continue to meet with people. Everyone who has asked for a meeting has gotten one. And we've also continued to receive written communications, and we are conveying all of those to you as they're made ready. So anything that was ready on Friday when council's packet was published was included in that staff report. Things that have come in since then, we've assembled them for you, and we put out a preliminary memo, an update for you this afternoon, and it will be posted on the web. Anything that we didn't pick up, we'll have a subsequent summary of it. We ran out of time after about 3 o'clock. We really have to work hard to be ready for these sessions. So we just want you to know that all of this material is public, it's transparent, and we are paying attention to it and reading it and responding to it within a boundary of what we consider to be what the Planning Commission reviewed. So let's talk about the revisions for a few minutes before your public forum. We hope that this will help address some of the concerns that we were seeing in the email. And if not, of course, when they're done speaking, we'll try to address them then. Of all the revisions, there are 3 that we really highlight in the staff report that we would like to highlight now, that are subsequent to the Planning Commission, where we discussed these items. The commission had input about them. They even had some forum about these items. And Brittany, go ahead and move to the next slide. These 3 topic areas, we got a lot of input right before the commission meeting, and we really didn't have time to do the level of research that we have now done with the city attorney and your planning staff to make some other recommendations than we did with the Planning Commission. So we'd like to quickly cover these 3 topics. These are distinct from the rest of the revisions that we'll talk about. With regards to sea level rise adaptation, there were comment letters. Brittany, if you can move to the next one. Thank you. We received comment letters and some concern about the definition of existing structure. And we had been using one that was provided in Coastal Commission guidance documents. And to be real clear about that, it has not been adopted into state law. And so there was some real concern about that. There was also concern about managed retreat policy, and we reviewed that as well. And so we've removed the existing structure definition, which means that the standard of review relative to existing structures is pursuant to Coastal Act policy, which is really the existing condition now. The city's LUP needs to be consistent with the Coastal Act. The managed retreat policy was replaced with a more flexible property protection plan approach, and it's a new policy, and it's intended to bring affected property owners who have coastal oriented development to the table sooner than later, before it's an emergency, to really think through and work through how they're going to proceed over time for making room, retrofitting, or otherwise having some kind of accommodation for dealing with best information possible in terms of bluff erosion. This is a new area of planning. This is work that we shared with the Coastal Commission staff, and they really appreciated the approach. And we can talk more. They may have more comments about it, but we really worked hard on having a lot of options for council to consider with this policy. Next slide is about the Bernardo Station area. This is a subdivision down at the south end of town. It's south of the greenhouses that are near Wavecrest Road, and then bounded by Redondo Beach Road. This subdivision has a medium density residential land use designation in the 1996 certified local coastal plan. So that's where it is right now, existing condition. We have worked on a lot of different options for that area. It's a challenging area. It does not have a sewer system. We are aware that there are wetlands in the area. We also have been receiving applications for and inquiries about new homes that wish to be on septic. They are not prepared to extend a sewer line to the area. And the city has a lot of rules about septic and minimum lot sizes, and on it goes. We actually tried this area as a plan development in a previous draft of the land use plan update. Property owners gave us feedback that they didn't want it. They wanted to approach this in a different fashion. So we took that out, and we suggested the low density designation in the Planning Commission draft that they looked at and made a recommendation about on September 8th. And what we heard from the property owners was, can you just leave it as it is? We're really interested in getting together and figuring out how to put forward an affordable housing project. Now, we've not seen an application for one. That said, if you were to keep this as the Planning Commission had recommended it at low, and an affordable housing project did come forward, there would be more hoops to jump through. And so in light of additional study that we've done and looking back at the housing element and its policies and the requirements for reducing barriers to the production of affordable housing, we would recommend at this point leaving it as it is, in the medium density designation. All the requirements about natural resource protection, about planning around septic or bringing in infrastructure, all of that is still required. So we just want to reassure you that we think this is a reasonable call. We just wanted you to know why we're recommending it, and we do think it aligns with your priorities. And the third one is North Wavecrest. So this plan development has, this area has changed a lot from the certified document right now. It's a very large plan development. And as proposed before you, it's quite a bit smaller because large lands have been removed from it, which have been purchased either by land trust or are actually the city Smithfield was taken out of this PD. And the result is that it's just a bit over 200 acres now instead of several hundred acres. And it also is in two distinct parts. It's much larger than any of the other planned developments in the city. And in the current certified document, phasing of specific plans is allowed in the Wave Crest plan development. We believe it would be most appropriate in this case because the disparate pieces of this PD are no longer contiguous, and because it is so large, and because the existing plan development provisions allow for phasing, we'd recommend putting that back in. Now, you will notice in the exhibit to your resolution that there are specific requirements about it and limitations on it. We would not want to open the door to having really small specific plan areas that chop it up and end up with an inability to plan the balance of the area or otherwise are not in context with the whole. Now, the Planning Commission considered this and they were concerned about how the area works as a watershed, as a natural resource system. And so we added some additional language about planning for the whole, even if there is an individual specific plan within that area. So we tried really hard to stay within the Planning Commission's intention, but we are highlighting that this is a change from what they recommended to you, these three things. Now, let's move on to the rest. There are some additional recommended revisions. Some of them are provided in your staff report packet, and we've been preparing some more, and we'll talk about that. These are intended to not change the allowed land uses as presented to you in the final Planning Commission recommendation. They are not complex changes. As I already mentioned, in some cases, they're really clarifying, for example, about where something might be located, about the source of the information that was presented. If there was a mistake, for example, there may be a land use that was present at one time in our documentation that has changed, and so we needed to update how we wrote about it. And we had some just a little bit here and there. We would use some adjectives about, oh, it was highly this or expansive that or something like that. We don't need that kind of language when we're putting out the facts, and taking that out does not affect master planning requirements, and it does not affect the need to do individual studies that may be required. For example, a visual resource study, a study about hazards and flooding. None of that goes away. That's all there. So this is about making the language really consistent from PD to PD. And we looked at all of them to make sure that we were treating them the same, at the same level of detail. And remembering back that we had a very detailed approach in the previous version, and the Coastal Commission gave us direction to one, pull back on detail, but two, also provide a vision statement. So we've been trying to balance those two things with how much detail goes into these descriptions. And I think this last review, going back through, we can see that we have a few remnants from the previous draft. And so we're really able to clean those up now. Okay, so there were 4 PDs that are getting just a little bit of a treatment around this. Nurserymen's Exchange, we're referring to the upland slope views. We're just changing, I think, a little bit of language around that. We also got some input this morning about a water course on that property. And so we are preparing to address that. We think it's something that should just be acknowledged in the description for that PD. So, you know, it came in at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning. So we're trying to keep up with it. Surf Dunes and Venice had very similar, they have similar allowed land uses. They also have some similar descriptions and conditions. So they both are going to, we're proposing to have a similar changes that just acknowledge if a hazard is potential or present, where things are, etc. And then west of Railroad, we got into a lot more detail about, and it's just like one sentence, about resources and buffers that needed to be presented in that description, because all of that is covered in your chapter 6, the natural resources section. And we should not be pre-planning what the buffers are, because we don't know what they would need to be yet. That needs to be considered through what's on the ground and new biological resource evaluation. So we would recommend pulling that out of that PD. It doesn't mean that the need to assess that is gone, or that the documentation about what's important to study in that particular area or any other is lost. That's all still there. Okay, next. So then, we've been seeing in the comment letters a lot of questions about what is agricultural and agricultural compatible uses in particular. And those are two uses that are proposed to be included in the Surf Dunes and the Venice PDs. And chapter 4 of the land use plan is the agriculture chapter, and there are definitions of agricultural land use, as well as what agricultural compatible uses are and supplemental uses for agriculture. So we would be referring to that in these reviews. Generally, an ag compatible use really is one that is preserving the soils. So ag protection is about protecting the prime soils, and the city has a lot of prime soils. So that was the driving force and the guidance for how to look at this. So examples could be a low impact outdoor recreation. For example, a lot of equestrian uses would qualify. They're not using up the soil. There's not a lot of really intense structures. They may have stables. They might not, hopefully they don't have foundations. And in such case, that would keep the footprint of development much lighter. So that's just one example. For both of these PDs, we did not propose any changes to any of the permitted uses. One property owner requested that visitor serving commercial uses be added to their PD, and you will see that we did not bring that forward. It's possible to have visitor serving commercial uses that are ag compatible, and so that is what we wrote about in the staff report and our associated documents, so that you can see how all those things relate to each other. The idea for these two PDs being at the north end of town, where the highest level of traffic congestion is located, is lower impact uses, lower trip generation, lower footprints, because we have prime soils. So and fortunately, those two components are actually likely to have ag compatible uses as well in that mix. So those things pair well together. Next slide. We were also noticing a lot of questions and comments about visitor serving accommodations and whether or not those would be considered agricultural compatible. And you know that the Coastal Act and Coastal Commission staff with their environmental justice policy in particular now are really focused on low-cost visitor serving uses. It's very important to them. They gave us a lot of guidance on how to address that in Chapter 5 of the draft land use plan, which is the coastal access and recreation chapter. We've talked to them quite a bit about it, and this comes up on a lot of their agendas right now. So such an example could be camping, where we're preserving soil, we're not paving things and to any large extent, and it needs to be lower cost, and the structures are movable, removable, small footprint, that kind of thing. So then the next question is, well, what about RVs? RVs are tricky. They clearly, if an RV park is developed with similarly to the three that are in the city now, they're paved, they're wholly paved. That approach would not be agricultural compatible. That's a very easy call. We give you this maybe because there could be a way to do it where you might meet the criteria. And if council would like to give input about this, we'd like to hear that tonight so we can be responsive to you. But the maybe is, what if maybe it was a seasonal use and it came in the summer and RVs were parked on wood chips and not on pavement, and that could be removed, and we're maintaining the soils, et cetera, and protecting drainage, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of, components about that as to whether or not it would be compatible. So we just put this out there for you. We did not get that specific in the land use plan. It's a policy document. It's meant to have flexibility over a long period of time for lots of different properties. And so this idea isn't just applicable to planned development areas. It might also be applicable to the new rural coastal land use designation or some other land use designation. So we just want to be mindful of unintended or intended consequences. Just think big when you're thinking about guidance around this, but we welcome it and we'll do research or anything else that you're interested in. Next slide. So we've also been meeting with other agencies. We've had some really great meetings with the Water District, and they submitted a letter of general support to you, to the City Council. And they had, we've had a number of rounds of revisions with them, and they've really whittled it down to just a couple things, and we picked those up in your packet. And we are working with Coastal Commission staff and have been collaborating with them and been supported by them, and we really appreciate the relationship that we have with them. We don't know how much more input they will have at this point on the draft. They have reviewed the entire document. We've incorporated everything they've given to us as it's come in. They are very busy people, so we know that it was a sacrifice for them every time they have to review a comprehensive land use plan update, and we appreciate it so much. These are 3 topic areas that they might have more comments about. They're complex. We feel very good about what we've put out, but we're just highlighting it for you. We like to be transparent. We want you to know what's going on. And then we get to this. So over the last few days, you've received all these communications, including a desire for more time to review. We're really glad to be able to reassure people, and we tried to do it with some emails today, that this was not a decision-making meeting tonight. It seemed like people thought that it was, so we wanted to let them know that. we saw a lot of concern about traffic, beach use and parking needs, and specifically about the Surf Dunes project, which of course is not on the table for you at this time. You're looking at the land use plan, but people are very interested in the land use plan and allowed uses for all of these planned developments. We also received a letter that went in your packet from Rocket Farms, and they were telling you about a concept that they have for adding housing to their property. They have a follow-up communication that came in this afternoon that we are providing to you in your memo. And in the follow-up communication, they're asking for you to consider expanding the Surf Beach, Dunes Beach PD across Highway 1 to include part of their property. With or without that idea, staff is not recommending any changes at all to what has been proposed for the horticulture business land use designation, which is what the designation is for their lands at the north end of town. And there is nothing in the revisions at all that have been given to you to date or that we intend to give to you that would recognize a land use change that would permit that much housing there. That has never come out of the process. You have directed this very clearly that housing should be in the town center. And furthermore, there is policy in the draft land use plan for citing housing element development sites in the town center or in the workforce housing overlay, for which Rocket Farms could potentially build workforce housing overlay units, which would all be affordable on the order of 40 units. Very different from what they're proposing. They want you to consider it. We made sure that you have that information. We don't think it's consistent with the Coastal Act. We don't think it's consistent with policy direction that we've had so far. We've had a very frank conversation with them about this, and they appreciated getting that kind of input that they are interested in. So, you know, they're going to communicate with you, and we, like with everyone else, we'll work with them and explore options for them. But what is proposed for them is what you have. Next slide. And I'm done. This is where we get to segue to your city attorney, who is going to give a brief coverage of how you're going to proceed should conflicts come up. And if you have specific questions later about any of the revisions or the context for how they're coming forward, let us know. Again, we want to be very clear that things have been coming in right up to the end zone here, and we are trying to accommodate them. There's a point where we need to stop, and we're going to be pens down. So we can talk about that at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jill. And I'll move through this. I know you want to hear from the community. So this is a map of the land use changes with circles for each council member. We're going to be following a slightly different procedure, given that this is a land use plan update, and the FPPC, the Federal Political Practices Commission, actually has special rules regarding these kinds of approvals, which actually provide a fair amount of flexibility for Planning Commission and councils to consider these broad plans that affect the property interests of individual council members. These rules allow the full council to vote on the plan, even though council members may own property that will be subject to it. So basically what we'll be following tonight is if a council member wants to discuss land use designations or other policies that are applicable to very specific parcels that are near their own property, they will need to identify that and basically allow themselves to recuse prior to substantive discussion. We're referring to these areas as the abstention areas. The FAPC rules create a procedure where these abstention areas, which have typically been 500 feet, but the FAPC actually recently amended the rules to create sort of a 1,000 foot buffer where council members do need to consider conflicts. And so to err on the side of caution, we've created 1,000 foot bubbles for each of you. And Brittany, do we have larger scale? We can maybe just click through it's a little easier to see. Great. And so this is Councilmember Brownstone, and you'll see that the purple is a 500 foot bubble, and the black is the 1,000 foot. And you'll see that there are two PDs that intersect, Nurseryman's Exchange and Surf Dunes. Maybe we can just click through a few more just to get a sense here. This is Councilmember Rohrbeck, and I believe there's Matucci. This is Councilmember Penrose bubble, and we can click through there. Councilmember Eisen, you see it doesn't really intersect with very many land use changes, with the exception of on the east side of the highway, there's some proposed redesignation for high density. And finally, Councilor Reddick does not intersect with very much here at all. So the process is going to be, and we sort of laid this out at the beginning, is that you'll hear public comment as usual, and council members may ask clarifying questions to staff as usual, as they typically do. However, once we get to the deliberation point, staff will ask whether any council members wish to discuss very specific areas, such as a specific PD that might intersect with another council member's 1,000 foot bubble. If they do want to deliberate on that specific PD or parcel, then that council member will recuse for the duration of that conversation, and then come back on when other policies are discussed. I do just want to make a note that, we are erring on the side of caution. So just because the council member is recusing with this procedure, that doesn't necessarily mean that they would need to recuse if an application came in. There are other basically analyses that go into whether the council member would have a material financial interest, and there are other exceptions that sometimes apply, such as a project that would impact the public generally, and that would generally impact most 25% of the public, and there may be other reasons that a council member wouldn't necessarily have to recuse once we get more information about a project. But at this level, we are recommending erring on the side of caution and going ahead and recuse if there is a specific discussion within your council, within your abstention area. So I think that is all but I'm happy to take any clarifying questions from council regarding that procedure. And then I think at this point, we're ready for any clarifying questions you might have of Jill or Brittany before moving on to public comment.
Thank you. Excellent presentations, both of you. And especially, I'm just appreciative. There's been so much communication in the past 24 hours. The amount of moving parts that we've all had to deal with is actually very high. I've taken quite a few calls today. The emails, I haven't been able to even get to some of them as they keep coming even during this meeting. So I just appreciate all the work staff's doing. I appreciate all the patience that everybody has in this process. In terms of clarifying questions, I'll open it up to council before we go to public comment. Please.
If I can ask, I've gotten a few comments about what is the relationship between the LUP and the general plan elements. That hadn't been addressed up to now. So I think for the general public, it's important to understand why we have a general plan, what the elements are, how that relates to the land use plan. So just a few general comments about the difference and requirements, please.
Thank you, Councilmember Marbach, through the mayor. I cover that really briefly, and then City Attorney can add if she wishes. So in the state of California, all cities are required, and cities and counties are required to have a general plan. A general plan is often referred to as the blueprint for the jurisdiction. And there are mandated elements that include land use, circulation, housing, noise, safety, open space, and conservation. And now we're also supposed to address environmental justice. And you can also have optional elements. Now, that is very interesting for a city like Half Moon Bay. So anybody who's not in the coastal zone, that's what they're doing. Their book, that's the scope. Half Moon Bay being wholly in the coastal zone, as already acknowledged, also needs to have a local coastal program that covers the entire city. So the way the city has managed this is that because the local coastal program covers development, coastal access and recreation, public works, in our case, agriculture, archaeological resources, visual resources, natural resources, and environmental hazards, there's a lot of overlap of those topic areas with general plan elements, in particular, the land use element of the general plan. So for Half Moon Bay, we use the local coastal land use plan, which you're looking at now, as the city's general plan land use element. We've also used it per previous adoption as the conservation and open space elements for the city, because local coastal programs get into a level of detail for protection of coastal resources, which is one of the two pillars of the Coastal Act, to a really extraordinary level of detail and requirements for implementing the Coastal Act. So there is overlap. There is places where these documents kind of bump into each other, and there is a real need for your staff and your review to ensure internal consistency inside general plans and the various elements, as well as in the local coastal land use plan policies, and then with each other. When I was presenting to you earlier, I mentioned a policy in the draft land use plan that specifically acknowledges a need around your housing element. So that's an example of how they get knit together. I hope that helped. We were going to talk about we are looking forward to working on the general plan elements. We got to finish what we're doing here with you. And before we're going to commit to a timeline, we need to understand what you need on this project. But that is in our queue.
Thanks,
Very
Jill.
good.
That's helpful.
Just a follow-up question on that. Could you explain more the implementation plan? We talk about IP, implementing the land use plan. What is that about, just for the public?
I'm going to start, and then in this case, maybe Brittany will fill in some details, but for Half Moon Bay, the implementation plan has two really big pieces and then could have a lot of other programs. For us, the zoning ordinance is critical, and then the subdivision ordinance. So you can imagine how both of those big, thick pieces of municipal code are going to have to fall under the policies of the land use plan, because those two ordinances set up permitted uses, how big they can be, where they're located on a property, how land can be subdivided or not, and all the other rules about what comes forth from those two things. So those are key. And then there are programs that are identified in the land use plan that we would like to establish, or maybe they already are. So for example, you now have an adopted bicycle and pedestrian master plan. That's a good implementing tool for the local coastal land use plan, and keeping it updated, just like the green infrastructure plan or the Parks and Rec master plan. All of those things are great tools. They don't live in your municipal code. They stand alone and they end up having their own planning processes. And there's a number of other implementation programs that we have identified as needing to be brought forward following your completion of policy review. We're bringing in a lot retirement program, for example. That could be in the code, that could be part of your zoning code, or your subdivision ordinance, but it probably needs to be fleshed out with some guidance along those lines. There are a number of other things like that, and we're happy to highlight them. We could even prepare a list for your continued meeting, but I hope that fleshes it out for folks.
So we mentioned, I guess I better check in with the city attorney. So I have a question about phasing. And of course, the Wavecrest PD is about phasing. I think I only touch on something that's already protected by post and not really touching on a developed area. Catherine, can you just, am I okay to talk about the issue of phasing?
Yes, and that was one of the items that Jill mentioned in her presentation as something that was it's in their existing plan. There is some level of phasing that is allowed for the North Wavecrest area. The Planning Commission, however, when it considered this updated land use plan, recommended a version that did not include that phasing. And so one of staff's recommendations tonight is to reinstate some level of phasing in the North Wavecrest.
Okay, so I just have a clarifying question about that. So you mentioned planning for the whole, but the phasing, details for the separate areas. So how would it work? That you look at the overall area, but master plan for a piece of it. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around how that would work.
I think it really goes to the level of detail that's in the master plan versus in the first phase specific plan. I actually do want to have the planners weigh in though, because I think they'll have a more, on the grounds sense of what how that would look like.
And let me just jump in real quick. So I'm going to let Robert take over the meeting for 20 minutes while I take care of a personal matter, and I'll be right back. Thank you.
Jill, do you want me to bring up the land use map? Yeah, then we can look at that. All right, can everybody see this okay? Let's go here. All right, can everyone see this all right? All right, so we have two different areas of North Wavecrest with the revised boundaries for the PD that are proposed for the land use plan update. So they are not contiguous pieces anymore. We are proposing to redesignate some of the larger parcels that are either that are in land trust ownership, either by Coastside Land Trust or Post, from the PD boundary, and put those into either the open space for conservation land use designation, which is this light green, or the rural coastal land use designation, which is this beige here. So we're left with these two gray non-contiguous areas of North Wavecrest. And right now the existing land use plan allows for 2 or more specific plans to be prepared for the North Wavecrest PD. and that's it. It's a bit open-ended. So what we have proposed in consideration of the Planning Commission's deliberations on this topic to consider the area as a whole is to put some boxes around it. So no more than 4 specific plans, minimum of 40 acres for each specific plan. Considering the remaining area needs to be able to be planned cohesively, so not a piecemeal 40 acres. And of course, addressing the ecosystem functions as a whole, as Jill mentioned earlier. So the northern part of Northern Wave Crest is about 130 acres. The part that's accessed from Wave Crest Road. And then the southern part, accessed from Redondo Beach Road, is about 98 acres. So we realistically see this as 2 separate pieces. Perhaps each of those 2 pieces could be 2 different specific plans for total.
And then, let's see. So I didn't see anywhere where we actually define what lower cost accommodations are or what a low impact, accommodation might be. And maybe I'm not seeing it, but you could just tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I could speak to that quickly, and Jill, jump in whenever. So we do not define it specifically. It is, general relative to other accommodation prices. The Coastal Commission has done a number of workshops on these types of lower cost accommodations. They have a formula. They have this really down to a science that considers the statewide average, countywide average. So you're looking at all types of accommodations in your jurisdiction or in your area or in the state, and then comparing similar to our different housing levels, if it's low, moderate, or high.
Okay, I'll probably have more to say about that after the public hearing. And I think that's all I have at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Does anyone else have any clarification questions? Deborah Harvey. Okay. That's it for the clarification question period. So we're going to now move into our open public hearing. And looking over, I see we have 3, 4 hands raised so far. So Jessica, do you want to take over here and let us know who's up?
Yeah, thanks. So I'll be using a timer on my phone. So when you hear the ding, that means that your 3 minutes are up. So every speaker is allowed 3 minutes. And if you would like to speak, please use the raise your hand feature. And we will start with Nick Bavaro from Rocket Farms.
Good evening, council members. Jill, everybody, thank you for having us speak here. In advance to this this evening's meeting on September 30th here, we wanted the city to have a copy of our planned verbal testimony, which remarks are all below. The City Council Planning Commission and senior staff have all received a letter from us which contained a conceptual plan layout for a residential project. We are asking for the consideration by council prior to finalizing the draft LUP to accommodate our property to recycle, to a residential use, which would allow both affordable housing and market rate housing, with a sufficient market rate housing to make the project economically feasible. The amount of housing that would be allowed under the current proposed LUP is not a feasible premise for the property owned by our company. It is important to impart to you that the community, that like most every other business, ours has been severely and drastically impacted through COVID-19. This should be no surprise to any of you. And while COVID-19 has consumed us in terms of operational priorities, we are pleased to be here now that we are clear understanding of the direction, and as a result can provide the important input for your consideration. Our direction is now to attract a labor force for our site that is based on more technologically supportive and agricultural operations. We now have requirements for our property that we believe dovetail with the direction of the state in terms of providing workforce housing, the kind of workforce housing that is meant for teachers and firefighters and many others. Our proposal, which is a concept plan that you have all seen, is in place in its start terms of density and a good unit mix. What does not work for us is a maximum of 40 units for all affordable project on this property, which has already been suggested. We think an overlay zone or perhaps an expansion of the existing PD to include our property is a good way to go. We think that this would provide Half Moon Bay with a more appropriate and meaningful solution to deliver housing that is accessibly priced for young families and workers. In addition to assisting in the ability to recruit and house workers, we are interested in building rental apartments to accommodate residents of Half Moon Bay who may not be able to afford to buy a starter home with a price tag of almost $1 million. Some of the specific requests and suggestions provide a planning or zoning overlay that would allow our site to accommodate a combination of market rate and affordable housing, or include our property within the Surf Beach Dunes Beach PD development. The latter would help our site and help the city achieve the development vision as described in the LUP update for the PD area. The LUP describes as a new residential neighborhood that was suitable for a multi-generational neighborhood with young families, seniors, and assorted other household groups. This is a project we are interested in developing. By expanding the footprint of the Surf Beach Dunes PD from across the street to include our site can be part of in achieving the LUP's vision. While we know the city wants to preserve agricultural resources, economic conditions are shifting, especially during COVID. Our own industry is operating on razor-thin margins that will not be sustainable long-term. To give you an example, if we were shopping—
Mr. Bavaro, sorry, but I appreciate your comments, but your time is up and I've already let you go over time.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Next we have Judy Taylor. Judy, go ahead.
Good evening. I rarely get to talk so early. First off, many of you don't know, I have been going to your plan encounter since 1974. And I want to commend you, council, for being smart enough to have the staff that you've got now. Going through this process has been very refreshing, that the staff has paid attention, and it's not that they've just, you know, oh, gee, we'll change this and we'll do that and all. It hasn't been that kind of process at all, but they have been open to input and responsive and respectful, and it's just, it really has been a very nice change. To that end, I'm really glad to hear that it seems like there's an interest in putting off decisions. What came through, it looked like there was going to be a meeting tonight, a meeting next week, and then you were going to ship it up to the Coastal Commission. So with changes still coming through, it's really nice that we're going to be able to have some opportunity to reflect on this. as a 45-year coastside resident, and given that your sphere of influence does extend all the way to Montera, I'm disappointed that there's not more vision. The acceptance that, you know, we're going to have 40 new jobs a year over the next 22 years. When we talk about sustainability, we have to talk about what does it mean to be sustainable. And when 80% of our workforce is commuting out of the community, we are not sustainable. There's a lot of talk about affordable housing, but yet any kind of a small house is going to be competing with new development at Ocean Colony. And so, you know, in many ways, this is refreshing and I'm gratified and excited and all of that. There's still a real lack of vision. And the coast side is different and unique. We are paralyzed by our roads. We are forced to accept visitors in really large numbers because of where we live, and rightly so. But I'm hoping that over the next few weeks, as we work through this, we can find ways to really support affordable housing and find ways to create jobs for locals so they're not going across the hill. And given that this virus has made a dramatic difference in our society, to not take advantage of that
15 seconds, Judy.
a mistake. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy. Appreciate it.
Okay, next we have Brent Turner. Brent, go ahead.
Good evening, Jessica, City Council. My name is Brent Turner. I'm associated with many green real estate groups, the U.S. Green Building Council. I'm an eco broker and also a member of Build It Green. I associate with the comments of my peer Judy Taylor, and also just wanted to raise my general objections and concerns surrounding corruption of process by developers looking to ignore the environmental sensitivity of our particular area, as we are unique, as Judy mentioned. Of course, we're all reaching the depths of our bandwidth here and noting that this process seems to be moving forward very quickly, although there is mention tonight that this is not a decision-making event tonight. The public is obviously concerned, as we are again at a crossroads apparently with the City Council, where the City Council looks like it's moving in the direction of developing the beach area and exacerbating the traffic issues. There's a quality of life issue that's occurring in Half Moon Bay now. And of course, the public is against the further building out of these projects. We want to see affordable housing, and that may be a different situation. It's very hard to keep up with the process here, and it is a little bit convoluted. I'm sure it's just my lack of attention to this particular issue, but if we could slow the process down enough that the public could get their arms around it. The concern is that in the end of the process, it's going to end up, we're overdeveloping the coast side, and the quality of life is going to suffer, and we're going to be further burdened by traffic, and basically the area is going to be ruined because we're in a rush to develop. And I understand it is beneficial to many to see mass development going on in Half Moon Bay, and we want to get those RV parks going up right on the beach and have hotels and all that kind of thing. But we're just all suffering here currently under the COVID. And so to further expedite these projects, we think is poor form. We're looking for transparency and just a chance to defend the coast side against what appears to be an overly aggressive
30 seconds, Brent.
An overly aggressive City Council that is in alignment with development. So the residents are against these projects. Thank you.
Next, we have William Regan. William, go ahead. You could unmute yourself.
Thank you.
I have a PowerPoint for you, Bill. Let me pull that up.
I think. Me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I'm getting your PowerPoint up right now. Give me one.
Okay. Thank you, Brittany. Okay, so I'm Bill Reagan. My wife Ann and I have owned a home at 18 Marauder Road in the Casimira HOA since 1975. And Brittany, if we could have slide 2. The land use plan that you're considering will cause the most significant scenic section of the coastal trail to disappear, and our homes as well. This beautiful place, as you can see in the slide, starts where Marauder Road meets the sea and ends at the state park. How scenic is this section of the coastal trail? Slide 3, please. The city has even used this picture of the trail right outside our homes on the cover of official reports. How well used is this section of the coastal trail? Slide 4, please. I'm sure every person on this call has enjoyed this use of this section of the trail. Slide 5, please. So if this section of the coastal trail disappeared, where else would people go? Slide 6, please. You can see the opening in the fence there where the entrance to the state park is. This is a land use plan update, and it will keep the trail a trail, but if we can look at slide 7, but it's not a coastal trail. It's an inland trail. Slide 8, please. It doesn't have to be this way. Please change the land use plan update to keep the coastal trail coastal. Slide 9, please. Why wouldn't it be in the city's best interest to do anything but keep the coastal trail coastal? Thank you.
Thank you, William, for your presentation and your comments. Appreciate it.
Next, we have Joaquin Jimenez. Joaquin, go ahead.
Good evening, council members and city staff. For some time, we've been looking into affordable housing here in Half Moon Bay. And we have been able to identify 3 locations, 3 prime locations for sustainable affordable housing. And everything's within the central area. Everything within walking distances to our schools, or shopping centers, or clinics, or sheriff's department, in or downtown area in Half Moon Bay. One of the prime locations that I'm talking about is the spot, the empty lot right next to our Catholic church, or Lady of the Pillar. That is a perfect location to build sustainable, affordable housing for our community. We have looked into it. The church have also looked into it as a possibility to build affordable housing on that location. There's the other location, Pedesta, right at the bottom of the high school, Lewis Foster Drive, is another prime location for affordable housing, sustainable affordable housing within walking distance to our high school, to our shopping center, to our restaurants, to our clinic, especially with our new programs that we have in the community about more biking and more pedestrian safety. The third location is a location that City of Half Moon Bay just purchased. We can look into it. The location that I'm talking about is on 92, the old Bay City property. I believe it was Bay City or Nurseryman's Exchange property. That's another location that we can look into it. So there's no need to move, to build affordable housing outside of the downtown area. We have to maintain our community together. And these are 3 prime locations that the city could look into about building sustainable, affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin. Appreciate your comments. Next up.
Next we have, oops, Irma Morowitz.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Okay, well, I've been a resident for over 20 years, and I would echo the same things Judy and Brent did. I'm also glad to see some transparency and glad to hear that, you know, there's going to be more meetings about the Dunes project. And I'm also glad to hear to rather put the focus on our community rather than building more buildings for tourists, convention center, RV parks. I'm glad to hear Rocket Farm possibly build some units, maybe not 300 units, which I've heard, you know, thrown around that number, because that would impact our streets, our Highway 1 as well. As I've written to all of you today, and I'm really concerned because there's just so much traffic, pumpkin weekend traffic, you know, daily, weekend, and especially since the COVID. And I'm concerned because, you know, if there's an emergency, we just can't go anywhere. And I want to, you know, really to consider all of that. And I'm glad to hear that you are trying to be more transparent and also give us more time in terms of more building. And I don't know if what you didn't talk about was there was some kind of 34-page letter that came from Dunes developer, owner, lawyer that was presented to you and that was going to be incorporated. Is that part of the package that you've discussed in your writings to us? So I'm not sure about that. Can anyone answer that for me?
Thank you, Irma. There will be time for staff to respond to any of the questions coming in.
Okay, well, thank you then.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay. Next we have Maddox Surdy.
Sorry about that. That's my son's Zoom name for school. So this is Nate Surdy.
Hey Nate, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay? Cool.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Hello again and good evening. My name is Nate Surdy and I'm happy to be speaking with you tonight. I was born and raised on the coast side, lived since 1978, have been a successful realtor for 16 years now. I make this statement as the chairperson of the Half Moon Bay Coastside Chamber of Commerce. I'm just finishing my first year as the chairman, and I've been a member of our board for 4 years now. Furthermore, I'm also the member of the Government Affairs Committee of the board and make this statement on behalf of both. The Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors would like to request before any decisions are made, we would like to provide input on the current LCP. While we understand that the discussion has gone on for quite some time, after reviewing the document, we believe that the business community could be potentially missing out in our future. We planned on speaking to a council member at our last government affairs meeting, but unfortunately there was no one there to relay this message to. Here are some talking points that we believe should have further consideration. One, due to COVID-19, we believe that this document should take into account post-COVID implications. What is the workforce of the future? Does our zoning allow for smaller remote spaces or business centers? Two, this document was only available for a few weeks with little input from the business community or the chamber. Is there a reason not to take a few more months to address? When there was the debate for cannabis production, the council asked for the Chamber of Commerce for input from all of the businesses and purveyors. In effect, this was a zoning decision too, and is there any reason why this is any different, and can we offer the same input? Three, we believe that the town center, by concentrating on so many activities, could further exacerbate traffic. Lastly, at a projected 40 jobs per year, it will not be sustainable for those who would also like to live here as well. We understand there is a need for a resolution and commend you for pushing this forward. Yet as this potentially moves forward to the higher court, the Coastal Commission, we ask that before you vote on this and it goes there, you consider the future of our economy and local business too. Commercial and business use is a component of that sustainable development. As always, we are grateful for our relationship and your confidence in us. We also thank you for your time, and we hopefully look forward to future discussions. Much respect to all of you in the positions you hold, and thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nate. Appreciate your input.
Next, we have John Callan. John, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'll try to be very brief. It's wonderful to be here nearing the conclusion of this process. And I sincerely appreciate all of your patience in listening to these claims and counterclaims and arguments all this time. We've been working in the Wavecrest PD area since the 70s, and we were always working in the long-term planning with the city. We ended up in the early 80s getting the redevelopment plan approved. In those days, we worked with the city council, the Conservancy, the California Coastal Commission, and developed the plans to develop our lands. Significantly, we entered into multiple agreements, written contracts with the city in the 1990s. In those times, of course, we were talking about the development of the entire 494 acre project, which has been come to known to be called Wavecrest. We believe that those contracts give us a strong claim for phased development. Essentially, the city agreed to cooperate and assist us with developing our property and developing our lands, and in the form of specific plans and master plans. And substantial money was paid in reliance on those agreements. So I think so the first thing I'd like to do and say, and this is, I'd say 2/3 of what I have to say today, is that I think those contracts that we signed are good. And I think that we have a good claim for phased development under the terms of those contracts. Remember, those payments were made during the times of the Great Recession when money was quite dear. Secondly, this idea of the 40-acre minimum, I didn't understand until this evening that they were considering the South Wavecrest project to include, I imagine they've cobbled together multiple subdivisions like Redondo Track, Redondo Beach, parts of Bernardo Station, perhaps. Well, what we've always been working on is our property, which is located in the Ola Vista Beach subdivision. And Ola Vista Beach is kind of a special fit. It's developed on 3 sides. It has Canusti, it has the Redondo Beach Road, the former Strawberry Convention Center, and the Ocean Colony Golf Course. So we got development on all really surrounding us. Now, there's no 40
30
acres
seconds,
there.
John.
There's only 20 odd acres there. We can't plan lands we don't own. It makes sense to do a large environmental assessment across a large area, but we can't do a master plan on land we don't own. One sentence. We suggest a mini master plan would be appropriate under all the circumstances for Ola Vista Beach. And we're suggesting something along the line of 4 or 5 acres. Again, look at the environmental assessment across the entirety of the tract, but have a mini plan of 4 and 5 acres. That's it.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mark. Mark, go ahead. Mark, if you could unmute yourself. There you go.
I think I'm unmuted.
There you go.
Greetings, Honorable Mayor and Council members. I'm Mark Massara, and I represent the owner of the majority of the Surf Beach Dunes Beach PD. You have our specific plan, a multi-year resource-intensive review and master development proposal specifically designed for you to achieve affordable recreation and visitor-serving amenities for Half Moon Bay residents and visitors, and frankly, more of it than any project in city history by far. It's apparent from many of the comments, both written and tonight, that people need to actually read the plan. It's posted on your website, and I think we could avoid a lot of confusion about the concerns regarding high-end resort uses if we would just focus on that specific plan. That said, you also have our LUP correspondence, which is really a deep dive and critique and analysis of the LUP and past city planning and guidance documents, which really highlights and underscores a long history of success in the city regarding development of residential and higher end luxury accommodations, and dramatically less success with affordable visitor serving accommodations. And we know that's not your goal. We believe you do support sharing coastal resources with visitors in a careful, deliberate way, and that inadvertently prohibiting affordable visitor serving uses in the North City area for the next 20 years was not the goal of the LUP. Unfortunately, it is a likely unintended consequence given the current development vision expressed for the Surf Dunes tract in the LUP. This is even more disturbing tonight given your staff's unprecedented assertion that car and RV camping is somehow a higher cost coastal recreation use. That would come as a shocking revelation to coastal commissioners and an unprecedented interpretation of the Coastal Act. In order to preserve this conversation regarding affordable commercial visitor serving uses, we've submitted Exhibit A for your consideration, which is simply an attempt to narrow the scope of our concerns and provide you with a few strategic modifications to the Surf Dunes PD vision to allow for consideration of recreation and affordable commercial visitor serving uses. If these changes are not made to the LUP, you run the risk of approving an LUP which emphasizes housing over visitor serving, and on its face is not consistent with the specific plan already before you. Our view is
30
that
seconds, Mark.
Our view is that you clearly didn't intend to prohibit Coastal Act priority uses at Surf Dunes, and that you certainly wouldn't want to prematurely circumvent master planning prior to even considering such uses as a 40-bed hostel and bike and car camping, which are priority uses under the Coastal Act. So we're asking that you add visitor commercial serving uses and recreation to the Surf Dunes development vision in the LUP so that we can simply have this conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mark.
Next, we have Casey Branscombe.
Am I off radio silence?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. First of all, for those that are kind of late to this party, this has been going on for almost 2.5, almost 3 years. I've been to every freaking hearing and read every word of every draft of every one of the LUP. And I want to say, even though my personal economic interest is really being hurt by this plan, I support the staff. I think the Planning Commission did an amazing job. And while, you know, it is not in my economic interest, I think you are limiting growth in Half Moon Bay, and you're seeing it in the stress of some of these PD owners. I think, you know, you're trying to balance some really conflicting goals, and I think this is a hard job, but, you know, we haven't had a real plan revision for 20 years, and the world has changed, and the city council needs to lead, and we need a good plan. So what I want to speak to tonight is just one specific aspect of this that's very near and dear to my heart as a family farm owner operator, 75 acres within the city of Half Moon Bay in the urban reserve. I want to speak to the impact of this plan with respect to extinguishing the urban reserve. That land use category was created in the 1983 LCP and described in every LUP since then as a specific location for phased medium density residential subdivision development, consistent with Sea Haven and Grandview and the subdivisions that we're immediately adjacent to. The commitment at the time was made to a handful of mostly large parcel open field properties that were in family farms as a positive incentive to stay temporarily in farming use, even though it wasn't economic, until the adjacent subdivisions were fully developed. That commitment was so strong that the writers created a Table 9.1 that has been carried forward in every single LUP since 1983, with specific allocated residential density allowances to each of approximately 12 properties. My land surrounding Sea Haven is a majority of 650 of those units. You're taking that entirely off the table in this plan. You are extinguishing the urban reserve and saying it is not for future residential development. It's for agricultural, equestrian uses, etc. And what I want to just encourage you very strongly is to realize that by extinguishing urban reserve and putting us in rural coastal, as you propose to do, that is a huge win for limiting residential growth in Half Moon Bay. But it means that you have a moral, I believe, an ethical obligation, and it's in the interest in preserving the cultural, agricultural heritage of Half Moon Bay to be fair to these new rural coastal ex-urban reserve family farms like myself and Terry Andriotti, you know, the Greenhearts leases, the Santos property next to me, you know, to make sure that we have flexibility in economic uses, equestrian uses, flexible.
That's time, Casey.
Agriculture, and just follow through. You know, one size doesn't fit all in land use regulation. Support family farms, be fair to the urban reserve, and implement meaningful active support for agriculture and sensible equestrian uses in the rural coastal zone, and we will have a great city of Half Moon Bay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Casey. Appreciate it.
Next, we have Joanna Meyer. Joanna, if you could unmute yourself.
I think you're still muted, Joanna.
Joanna, are you there?
I'm sorry. I've got you on too long. Sorry. Let me just. Okay. I have.
We're getting a really bad echo. Are you able to?
Yeah, I'm. Just turn it off, Joel. I have a few very specific questions. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The first one has to do with some just. Joel, can you turn it off? I'm hearing the echo. I'm very, very sorry. There seem to be several things in what I reviewed that show that are specific to the Dunes project. And one is the change in the equestrian use. Another is the way that the buildings are allowed to cluster and be higher without affecting the vision corridors, you know, that it's allowed to exceed the 15-foot limit. And then another one has to do with how sensitive species are need to be identified rather than habitat. So I'm wondering if these things seem to be directly connected to the Dunes Beach development project. And I'm wondering how these these specific things got into the plan, the revisions to the plan. And whether they, see, one of my concerns about the sensitive species is that if you have to identify it and prove that it's present, it's much harder. It puts the burden on the city or the public to make sure that, to identify the species rather than on the developer to protect the habitat. I haven't had a chance to go through the whole thing, but these are some of the kinds of things I'm concerned about on the macro, on the micro level. Of course, I share all the concerns that other people have expressed about I love that area. I live just really close to it, and the idea of it being filled with buildings and
30 seconds.
Tourists breaks my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you.
Kate Meyer.
Hi, thank you for all that you're doing. And I wanted to just add to the concern about traffic that it is a life-threatening situation here on the coast with the fires, that if we bring all these tourists in and we need to evacuate, we're really creating a very difficult situation. And I wanted to voice my concerns about that. I also really agree with Joaquin about the center of Half Moon Bay being a great place for affordable housing. And I would like to see affordable housing developed. And having tourism, I feel like if we destroy the area in the process and also create this very dangerous situation, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Next, we have Rod Young.
Hi, I appreciate your time. My name is Rod Young, and my wife and I own a home at 28 Marauder Road, one of the 10 Casa Mira townhouses. Casa Mira has been working for more than 3 years to gain approval for a bluff support project to protect our homes. Reviewing your proposed plan modification has been a disturbing process for my wife and I. Although we appreciate the Planning Commission's recent amendments, we are concerned that the proposed plan will still not allow us to use our own money on private land to support the bluff and protect our homes. The result will be that homes which have been there for almost 40 years will collapse into the ocean or otherwise be destroyed in the next few years. This will be devastating. We really don't believe this is something the city wants. With the new plan, even with the new modifications Jill's team has proposed, Half Moon Bay appears to be effectively reversing the earlier support for bluff protection, our bluff protection project. Under the Coastal Act and the Half Moon Bay Coastal Plan approved in 1996, we were allowed to protect our homes. The city is now modifying the plan to please the Coastal Commission, even though that is not legally required to do so. The proposed plan now appears to provide us with only 3 alternatives for protecting our homes. Reinforce the homes, which doesn't solve a problem with erosion of the bluff. Relocate the homes, which is likely not possible, or remove the homes. Even though it would be a very feasible solution, no seawall or riprap, which has long protected other buildings on Marauder Road, would be allowed. With the adoption of these retroactive changes to the plan, you are asking owners of homes built in 1984 with both Half Moon Bay and Coastal Commission permits to likely destroy our homes. As a result, we will either have to absorb the very considerable financial loss or file suit against the city of Half Moon Bay for illegal taking under the California and US constitutions. Does anyone believe that this change by Half Moon Bay is fair? Or is this kind of financial risk in Half Moon Bay's interest? I appreciate your time and for listening to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you for your comments.
Stuart Schlisserman.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, again, thank you for your time and listening to all of us. I am a homeowner also in the Casamira townhomes, one of the owners, and I just want to reiterate that the LUP that's been put forth, even with the accommodations that staff has made and the recommendations you've all made, doesn't allow us, it seems, to be able to armor the bluff. And to us, I mean, I know there are, tons of considerations, but to us, it seems like a win-win situation. We do not want to lose our homes. We don't see how managed retreat is really going to work for us unless somehow we get land from state parks and then we can meet all the different criteria that we would need to move. So we are kind of boxed in where we can't armor the bluff. We don't have a place to move, and we're going to end up losing our homes. To us, who are willing to foot the bill for a seawall, along with access to the beach, help preserve the coastal trail along the coast, we don't see how this in any way benefits us and benefits the city of Half Moon Bay. And we would, appreciate as you, before you, codify this, that maybe you look to exempt us from the LUP in the section, I believe it's 740. I respectfully ask you to look at that once more. Appreciate the accommodations you guys have already made, sincerely. But again, I think it's going to leave us between, as I said, a rock and a hard place, and that we're going to lose our homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart.
Next, we have Anne Regan.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work that's gone into this. It's a huge undertaking and appreciated mostly. In 1995, my husband Bill and I purchased the townhome at 18 Murata Road from Brian Beer, its owner. He was a former mayor of Half Moon Bay and the developer of the Casamira complex and the building at 2 Murata Road. We intended it as a retreat and refuge, and with our large extended family of 4 generations, have enjoyed it as such. We have never rented it out. It has been well used and loved by our family. Over these 25 years, we have supported local businesses, restaurants, and tradesperson, happily paid property taxes, feeling lucky to take part in a wonderful community. The exceptional view of ocean, sky, and hills is inspiring, not just to us, but to all the people using the coastal trail and beach below every day. On weekends, we see countless families of all types spread out on the sand, enjoying picnics, surfing, fishing, and splashing in the waves. We see them carrying their provisions on the trail, children in hand, walking dogs, riding bikes, a beautiful scene of humanity. The joy of all this will be lost for us and many others if the land use plan update mandates the destruction of the coastal trail and our Casamira homes. As a complex, I think we have been good citizens of Half Moon Bay. Casamira was designed to fit into and enhance the natural setting. It is well maintained and gracefully landscaped. As noted before, we have been willing to protect our property and the coastal trail at our own cost, providing ample stairs, giving greater beach access to the public. But we have been prevented to do so by the Coastal Commission. We do appreciate the support of the city staff and council ever since our bluff collapsed. I urge you to at least modify section 740 so that it does not apply to Casamira. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Appreciate your comments.
Great job.
Next, we have Karen Erickson.
Thank you. And thank you for all your time and your planning. After 35 years of living in our unique community, I am worried. Why? Because I keep seeing development happening and building out. And I hope you've considered how much growth there has been already, not just homes, but hotels. So much so that it's hard to leave your home on the weekends, and my commute has tripled in the past couple decades, if not quadrupled. And that was, of course, the COVID. I hope you consider that we have lack of roadways here. I keep hearing about we're going to develop this, we're going to develop that, but I haven't heard anything about thoroughfares, or we don't even have a secret road anymore because Google has made everybody aware where our little secret roads are to get back and forth. It has made so much impact on our community about the development. I'm just very worried about it. And in conclusion, I also would like to save Dunes Beach. And I appreciate those at Casamira for saying what they had to say, because I also live in not their community, but right a couple blocks up from them. And I also have just seen that coastal trail just disintegrate and the ranger homes disappear there too. Now, again, thank you very much. I look forward to the next meeting.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate your comments.
Marion Adney. Marion, you're muted.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. My name is Marion Adney. I'm a resident, a homeowner in Montera, and I want to first thank the City Council and the Mayor for taking my comment. I would like to echo the many people that have spoken already, asking for more time to review the land use plan. I've looked it over and I realize that it is a very long and comprehensive document, and I commend the work that's been put into it. But I really haven't had a chance to absorb it and be able to make the comments that I would like to make. I also want to echo some of the sentiments that have been said here. One about affordable housing, the need for that, and keeping it in the downtown. And also the comments that people have made about the traffic and the potential evacuation routes in case of emergency. I think we've all seen what's been happening in California, and I appreciate that this land use planning process has been going on for some time, but the conditions that we're facing have changed dramatically in just the last couple of years. And I think it's very important to take that into consideration. I did look at the environmental hazards section of the land use plan, and the section on fires is extremely short and doesn't address at all issues of access and evacuation. And if that's present in another part of the document and I missed it, my apologies. But I would like a little bit more time to review and comment on that. I also appreciate the comments about the preservation of Dunes Beach and the coastal trail. And finally, just one last comment, and that is that I've called into several meetings. I'm a little newer to this process than many of the speakers, but I've heard a lot of comments, and I haven't really heard the Land Use Planning Commission or the City Council respond to those comments. And so I'm wondering when there will be an opportunity for the public to really hear these concerns addressed directly. So thank you again for taking my comment.
Thank you, Marion. Appreciate it.
May I ask a question real quick, Robert? Just real quick. So I believe that some of the comments are going to be addressed. And I believe Jill's taking all these notes, and I'm sure we've already talked about this, but just so you know, as you are saying that, you will hear responses coming up at the end. So please just stand by as you continue to ask your questions. Sorry, go ahead.
Thanks. Next, we have Bob Pelican. Bob, if you can unmute yourself.
Okay, I think I did it. This is Geraldine Pelican. My husband is Bob. I'm using his computer.
Hi, Geraldine. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. And thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening. As I said, my name is Geraldine Pelican. We live in El Granada, and we've lived here for over 20 years now. I am here tonight because I am extremely concerned about the proposed Dunes Beach Hotel. The Sioux Native American tribe talks about how important decisions should be made thinking of the impact on people 7 generations in the future. So when I think about that, I think we need to decide what is important to us, what really matters, and then our action should reflect that. I am here tonight because what matters to me is the future of my granddaughter and the future of all children. What matters to me is our unique coastal culture, our small town charm, and the natural beauty of living by the ocean. What matters to me is the wide visibility of the sea, the quiet walks, not increasing our already intense traffic, protecting our fragile environment, and choosing sand over cement. Richard Attenborough said, "You don't know who you are until you know where you are." Well, we here are blessed by this beautiful place, and I am so grateful, and I want to secure this beauty for future generations. And then I'll just close by saying, just a little while ago, my husband and I were talking about back with the first time we ever went to Waikiki in Hawaii in the 70s, and there was just a few hotels and then a wide expanse of the beach that you could even see from the road. And now today, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, there are hotels lined up in 2 rows all along the back of the first hotel, so the view from the road has disappeared. And it makes me think, do we want that to happen to our coast, where we're driving along Highway 1, looking at building after building after building? So thank you so much. This discussion we are having tonight is crucial and will determine the quality of all of our lives. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Geraldine, and thank you for the Attenborough quote. Appreciate that.
And next we have Brad Steinweed. Brad, are you there? You might be muted.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to the city and to the Planning Commission for all the work you've done. I'd particularly like to call out Bob and Jill for the work that they've done. Bob commenced the evening by saying this is a monumental hearing, and I take that as a truth. I am obviously, because I've spoken before, acutely interested in the dunes, surf, Venice Beach area and retaining it as open space. The comments I'm about to make relate to the document that was received by the city from Mark Massara and the comments that he gave earlier when he responded. Mr. Massara said that his proposal was being turned down on something to do with the cost of the housing. What I heard was that RV parks are tricky and that paved services are not agriculturally compatible. Thank you for saying that, because paved services are certainly not agriculturally compatible. The written proposal that was put forward to the city by Mark Massara on behalf of his clients stated that the plan was developed over many years and at considerable cost. Well, boo-hoo to that. I'm sorry, we've all spent money. That doesn't mean that it gets passed. I also found something very interesting in the article. Somewhere in there it says, yet despite the strong animation of the 2020 land use proposal, so on, the one-story height limits absolutely prejudices against visitors and clustering or establishing view corridors in the future. I wonder how it's proposed that you can establish view corridors in the future. I would love to hear how that's possible. Thank you very much again to the city for the work it's done, and I appreciate the fact that we don't want any paving over agriculturally prime soils. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate it.
Next, we have Lenny Roberts. Lenny, you might be muted.
Now unmuted.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for, I even saw the little symbol. Thank you. Well, we wrote you a letter last night requesting that you refer the land use plan back because of all the significant changes that are being proposed after the Planning Commission had taken action to recommend the plan to you. I joined the meeting late. I joined about 6:40, so I am gathering that you are going to provide more opportunities for public comment, either at the council level, is what I am kind of gathering. Is that correct? Can somebody confirm that?
We're still working on, yes, more comments. We're deciding exactly what process we're going to use.
Okay. All right. Well, whatever process, it would be really greatly appreciated to have a bit more time for the public and you all as well to fully comprehend all the requested changes and be able to respond to them. We have some additional comments to the draft, but because it's such a moving, there's been many modifications, and there's been a lot of, I truly appreciate Jill and Brittany making time to meet and explain things, but there's still unanswered questions. So we would appreciate more time. Regarding Surf Beach and Dunes Beach, just want to point out these are both comprised of prime agricultural soils, and agriculture is the highest priority land use under the Coastal Act. It's higher than visitor serving commercial. These soils are Class 2 Denison loam and Class 2 Farallone coarse sandy loam, which are present on the south parcel on Dunes Beach, but they're also present on Surf Beach, even though they haven't been officially mapped. You could infer that from the mapping of the adjacent parcels. And I think the applicant actually did state in their application that there's prime soils on Surf Beach. So portions of both of those, both surf and dunes, are in agricultural use and have been in the past. The limitation of the acres' ability to be farmed is primarily due to water availability, and that could be easily solved by drilling ag wells within the terrace aquifer that's adjacent to Frenchman's Creek that's on the property. The city already has, regarding the visitor serving commercial, the city already has close to 1,000.
20 seconds, Lenny.
I'm sorry. For visitors in hotels, motels, and inns. And there's another 50 spaces of RV park that are being proposed at the harbor. And also the occupancy rates currently are way, way down, and they were previously not even at a sustainable level as far as needing more facilities. So we'll look forward to more conversation with staff and with the council or the planning commission, whatever is being proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny.
And Thomas Roth.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, City Council members. My name is Tom Roth. I'm the attorney for the Casa Mira Homeowners Association and its members who own the 10 townhomes at the end of Murata Road in Half Moon Bay. You've heard tonight from a number of the owners of those townhomes, and they have two main areas of concern with the LCP update. First, they're concerned that because the LCP update does not allow riprap or seawall to be placed to protect a collapsing bluff in front of their homes, that they will lose their homes. Second, they're concerned about the loss of one of the most scenic stretches of the coastal trail in the entire state of California that's presently located here in Half Moon Bay. That's going to collapse when that bluff collapses. And the trail that would replace it is simply not a coastal trail. It doesn't have views of the ocean. And the homeowners ask, I think, what is a fair question. Is this really what the city of Half Moon Bay wants to have happen? Does it want these homes to fall in the ocean? Does it want this scenic coastal trail section to fall in the ocean? We hope not. But related to that, I think I want to make briefly one important legal point. And that is that the LCP update was based on guidance from the Coastal Commission. And the City Council should understand that that's simply guidance. The City Council does not have to follow it. It's within the city's authority and prerogative to simply reject provisions or modify provisions in that guidance document. Now, while the city has discretion to not include Coastal Commission guidance requirements, it does not have discretion to adopt an LCP that conflicts with the Coastal Act. And the current iteration of the LCP does conflict with the Coastal Act. Even with the most recent changes that the planning staff has proposed, which we appreciate, the LCP doesn't allow a seawall or riprap to protect the Casa Mira homes, even though the Coastal Act mandates the grant of a shoreline protected device permit to protect existing homes. And remember, these homes have been there since the early 1980s, almost 40 years now. So we would ask that the City Council take some more time to allow us to have these discussions with planning staff to find some sort of way to add something to the LCP update that allows these homeowners to protect their homes that have been there for 40 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas.
Okay. Next we have Contramestre Montana.
Hello, yes. So that is my my teaching name. I teach a martial art in the Half Moon Bay area and live here as well. Bay Area native, and I'll talk about that word native a little bit too, but I just want to echo folks like Mrs. Pelican, passionate about preserving as much of the core of what Half Moon Bay represents to us as it is. And yeah, I know it's hard to balance past, present, and future in something like this. And, we're all fixated on COVID and fires, but, when a lot of what you're trying to plan gets put in place, who knows what we'll be dealing with. So, thinking scalably, as I trust you all, as to what the land use program could mean and whatever the world will be in a few years from now. One thing, just taking advantage of the forum here is, and I've seen this in all the years coming to the coast, there's areas, and I don't know if they're in the plan, but around Fisher's Taverna, around Sunflower Mall, where you walk by the Pillar Cedars Creek, it's just laden with, it's dilapidated with mattresses and sofas and all that. And I don't know if this is a maintenance issue or if it's part of the plan, but yeah, I don't think a lot of tourists get in there. I like to hike those areas. The creek is protected, luckily, but yeah, it's pretty frightening, a lot of that stuff. So I just want to voice and take advantage that I have you all here and hope there's a plan there. What was the other area? Yeah, the Main Street Bridge. I think there's a plan I read on the site to rejig that a little bit, but it'd be nice to clean up things a little bit, look at priorities, remember the past. You know, we've acquired this amazing land from the biggest native population in all of America was concentrated on the coast because of this rich ecosystem. And I think if we could all, everybody on the call, not just the council, remember that and honor that into the future. So that's all I wanted to say, just broad stuff. I appreciate all the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Next is Mike Ferrara. Mike, go ahead.
Good evening, council members. I sent a letter or an email earlier today, and the leading theme in that letter addressed some of the things that were talked about by several people, including Joaquin. And I want to congratulate the city on getting to their long-term goal of getting priority water for affordable housing by addressing farm worker housing. All right, that's an achievement that's in this plan, and that's a good thing. But I really do feel that it's better for the city if our farm workers are as close to the city core as possible. It's less impact to our highways and streets, and it gives a better ability for these folks, these families, to participate in our community and our schools and services. So I strongly support that idea. In fact, I would like to say that the concept of putting 40 such up in the northern part of the town is counterproductive. That those would be better off overall in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, vehicle miles traveled, were it in the core. And as I did state, farm worker housing does not need to be on a farm. Moon Ridge is not on a farm. The other thing, I also would like to second Lenny's comments about soils. I appreciate that staff is going to fix a small riparian problem in the Nurseryman's Exchange PUD. Regarding North Wavecrest, I really would like to see a change in the wording on page 258, where we say residential uses would ideally be clustered near the Ocean Colony residential area, et cetera, et cetera. That seems a bit promotional. That wording might better be could possibly be clustered, and possibly is kind of a long shot because I know the area, I know the wetlands that are there, and the fact that, you know, those plots have been there for 120 years and nothing's happened. There's a reason for that. There's no water, there's no sewer, there's no drainage, there's no streets, there's no power, there's no nothing. And Redondo Beach Road is hardly the kind of road you could
time, Mike.
The subway. That was the whole time?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
And Victoria is our last speaker.
Hi, thank you very much. And thank you for all your time and attention to these matters. And I just wanted to echo my support of not having the hotel or whatever is going to be at Dunes Beach. I love our community and the open space that we have, and people being able to, I love the picture of the coastal trail that was shown in one of the PowerPoints of the openness that we have as living here on the coast that everyone can enjoy. It's not just us living here, but there's so many communities that have put hotels and houses all along the coast and right on the beach so that nobody can see it. And we have this beautiful open space that is, to me, just the most amazing thing about our coastal cities. I live in El Granada. I love running the trail, biking it, and I know so many other people do that come to our coast. And so I'm just really urging you to not support any development there. It's just such a beautiful prime piece of open space. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Victoria.
Okay, we do have 2 more speakers. Sue Rainieri, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my comments tonight. I've watched, I've lived here since 1989, and I've watched all summer since Memorial Day what is happening on the coast side. And it's with great frustration that I express that I don't feel like we can even handle what we have now. We're not doing it. We're not taking care of our coastside community. We're not worried about environmental sustainability. We're not dealing with bio waste. We're not dealing with the crowds that are coming here. And I don't feel like we have it together to take on any more than we're already experiencing right now. So I just would encourage us to take a pause before we do any more development, before we approve any more growth, before we approve any more hotels and visitor serving services. I just don't feel like there's a plan to even handle what's going on right now. So I'm very saddened by what I've seen over the last 3 months. And I don't feel like the council, even looking at you right now, that you even are that worried about it. You just look like you're listening to us all talk. And I'm just saddened by what I have seen happen to the coast over the summer. I'm just very sad. So I hope we really take this seriously. I hope we think about the future of the coastside community and the environment, because I've not seen that happen over the summer. That's all I have. I'm very sorry to see what's going on here.
Thank you, Sue.
Arancha Casal, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thanks for this open forum. My comments as a resident too are almost identical to the previous speaker. I'm just very alarmed at the almost inevitability of the attitude in the council that we have to develop more. I don't see how that is sustainable. I don't see how that is smart, other than to favor those who are going to make money from it. I'm really concerned that this gem that Half Moon Bay and the surrounding area is going to be destroyed. It's going to become another coastal stretch filled with buildings, with hotels, with parking lots. What makes Half Moon Bay unique, I've seen year after year just slowly degrade. Every open space is being filled up little by little. I just don't see the point of this, other than making money for some people. It saddens me terribly, and it concerns me. And beyond the practical issues of traffic and congestion and lower quality of life, I think it's just sad that a place as beautiful and as unique as this area is not being protected, is not being appreciated for its uniqueness. Thank you.
Thank you, Arancha.
That concludes public comments.
Okay, and that concludes our public hearing. And I'm hereby close the public hearing. Oh. Debbie, sorry.
Yeah, that's very good. Let's close the public hearing. Do you mind if I go back in?
Yeah, Debbie had a quick question. So
Oh, okay, go for it.
I'd like to recommend a 15-minute break.
I was thinking that along that exact time. Is that enough for you, Jill?
It's 8:27 now. Let's reconvene at 8:45. And
I'm
we'll,
okay with more too. If you want to take 20 minutes or 30 minutes, I'm okay. Whatever staff thinks they need, you know, to be able to respond.
yeah, no, understood. That's a lot to take in. Jill's been taking unbelievably great notes as everything's been. I'm sure the community very much wants to hear the responses to all their different concerns. Jill, what is a good timing for you to just kind of prepare yourself? Because I mean, even myself, I was again called by multiple people today about tonight's meeting, and I've received so many emails. I will still work on trying to reply to them later into the night tonight, but haven't even been able to get to everybody today.
All right. So thank you for asking. We are very focused on providing comprehensive and thoughtful responses. And we do need at least 15 minutes, but I really don't think we need much longer than that. I am not the only one taking notes. You've got 4 or 5 people who are going to make sure that we divide and conquer by our areas of expertise so that you get the most thoughtful feedback possible. And we are really eager to meet some new people too. So we hope, again, this process facilitates that.
And just out of curiosity, that's fantastic. Let's try 8:45. Were you able to kind of group some of those things into, okay, good. Because I think what I heard was a lot of different topics that were able to be grouped together in terms of response. So thank you for
That's what we do. Yes.
Awesome.
And I'm okay with 20 minutes too, if you think that'll be
all
helpful.
right. Sounds good.
Let's reconvene. Let's reconvene at 8:40. Well, I guess that's at 8:50.
8:50 it is.
And you can just all stay on, mute yourself, turn your cameras off, and just come back at 8:50. Thank you. Again. Feel like I'm like the reading rainbow person. So, all right. Jill, this is the moment I think everybody is very excited for. It's some response to all the comments that just came in. I'm going to let you take it away. Thank you for organizing yourself during the process. Appreciate it.
We will do our best. And if we miss anything, just let us know and we'll come back around to it. So we're going to go in order. Brittany Cozzolino is going to start, and she's going to cover some very specific detailed comments and help folks out if there were things that they might want to know more about in the plan and where to find them and things that were changed. Catherine will go next and cover some of the really important matters that you heard about Casa Mira in particular. And then I'm going to finish and with some more context that I think would be helpful for the community to have.
Great, thank you, Jill. So we heard a number of questions about build out. I just wanted to start by bringing everyone's attention to Appendix B, where we really show our math on how we anticipate each land use designation building out as proposed in the land use plan update and in comparison to the existing 1996 land use plan. So the updated land use plan has a really more realistic build out than the 1996 document for a number of reasons, and is reduced by about 1,300 dwelling units. You can see the comparison in land use designation changes. One of the main impetus for that change is in the plan development land use designations, where we've introduced a new concept for the master planning process, where we want to look at the net land area that the PD can actually support for development. So it's before you even start planning the development, take out the areas that you can't build on because there's wetlands or other types of sensitive habitat, hazards, and so on. So that has produced a more realistic build out from our existing plan. We follow this up in Chapter 3, as well as in a little more mathy detail in Appendix B, with where we might hit those limitations in build out with our infrastructure system. So water, sewer, roadways, those 3 systems are all analyzed against our anticipated build out for the plan horizon at 2040 and for a maximum theoretical build out.
So just to be clear, I'm going to do a little back and forth with you, so it's not just one person talking. So just to clarify, you are saying that there is less ability to build in Half Moon Bay by 1,300 houses in this new general plan than in the previous general plan.
Yes, that's as we anticipate it.
So as people keep talking about the growth of Half Moon Bay and the exponential and all the things, you're actually saying this new plan is doing less for growth.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there any way, and I don't know if this is possible, I'm just going to ask you this as we're going through. I have this humongous binder here that I use for this. Is there any way, are you referencing these page numbers as we go through, or?
I can't see the page number. Would you? Oh, 135.
Not for that particular answer, but is there a way that as you guys go through? Is there? I don't know if are you looking at the same thing that I am, or is something different?
I'm looking at the same thing we provided you in your binder. So I'm specifically referencing table B2 on page B3 of Appendix B, and that's at the very end.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where we compare the existing land use plans build out to the proposed update.
All right, perfect.
All right. I'm sorry?
Is it possible to put that up?
Sure.
You're talking about it?
I was going to move on a little bit. Did you have specific questions that I can answer? And
she means put it up on the screen so she can see, or the public maybe can see the page that you're referring to. I think.
Share screen. So are you able to do that while I finish my? I can't look at my notes and screen share at the same time.
Yeah. Right. How about through the mayor? I think staff would do best to work through our responses. See if council has clarifying questions around those, and then we can put materials up on the screen. But as Brittany says, it's really hard for us to juggle all of it, and we just want to make sure that we're covering everything really well. Okay.
I'm extremely familiar with the juggling of multiple things as I've learned to do this from the Zoom atmosphere. So please, absolutely proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I just have one little laptop.
I see Debbie Ruddick has her hand up real quick.
I have a clarifying question. So does that exclude or include accessory dwelling units, that number 1,300?
Accessory dwelling units are considered in the build out calculations.
Thank you.
So including.
We have to back up. We're talking a lot about build out without our table. Why don't we finish our discussion of responding to folks' input, and then we can talk about planning horizon build out, the maximum theoretical build out. I'm concerned about not giving enough context around it by answering on the fly. This is really nuanced, and it's been deeply thought through, and we are happy to go through it, but we can't just click. So I'd love it if Brittany can keep going, and we will get there. We promise we can get there.
All right, so there's many layers to the build out considerations, what type of land use designation you're in and what those permitted uses are within that land use designation, any applicable Coastal Act requirements for habitat buffers, additional limitations on permitted uses in different types of habitat, and then the net land area requirement for PDs, as I mentioned. So there's multiple boxes around the build out projections that we will dig into in a bit. I'm going to move on. So there was a question about where the written correspondence received can be found. This was in attachment 3 to the staff report for this meeting that can be found on the City Council's website for the agenda for this meeting. Feel free to email any of us if you have trouble finding it. Let's see, there were questions about how the plan is addressing traffic congestion and hazard responses and evacuation needs. We want to assure everyone that these are topics that will be covered in the safety element and in the local hazard mitigation plan. Of course, they have some overlap with the land use plan requirements around hazard planning as required by the Coastal Act. So the environmental hazards chapter of the land use plan is going to be incorporated into the safety element and then built on to further address emergency response requirements. So that is something we will be turning to once we complete the land use plan update, and we look forward to that. There was a question about specific language for the North Wave Crest PD and showing our development vision in a way that identified certain areas might be appropriate for certain uses. We did pull back on that language a bit in the revisions that staff is recommending to council. That was in the Exhibit A to your draft resolution. So we pulled back on it and are really just looking for consideration of land use compatibility. So there was a little added language around that. There was a question about the motivation for some specific changes to the surf dunes PD. I just wanted to hit briefly on each of those. The equestrian change was intended to more accurately reflect the current site conditions. The visual resource edit was made to carry forward something that is already in our existing land use plan. We want to be clear that there is still a 15-foot height limit, but the language does allow some flexibility in the master planning process if there will be no visual impacts from a greater height limit. So that is in your existing plan now, and we are proposing to bring that language forward in our recommended revisions. And finally, the bio report would be the start for identifying any sensitive species in an area. So this isn't necessarily a burden on the city. This is a requirement for any new development that is in or near sensitive habitat. We require the applicant to provide the city with a bio report that shows what types of habitat is there, what types of species could be supported, and then we make our planning decisions from there. And this is, of course, occurring at a larger scale for planned developments or lot by lot for infill. And I think I had one more thing. So the comment about the RV parks being lower cost, we are referencing a Coastal Commission report from 2014. They did a series of public workshops on lower cost visitor serving accommodations and did identify that RVs can be higher cost when you are considering the cost of either purchasing and maintaining or renting an RV, combined with the cost of the campground fee, gas, all that added up may not be considered low cost. And I believe that is everything for me.
Am I up next?
Yes.
Great. All right, so I'm going to cover the comments that were made by the representative Casamira, as well as comments regarding a representative of the North Wave Crest PD. With respect to Casamira, I wanted to note, first of all, that this is a matter that is subject to litigation. But there's quite a bit of publicly available information that I can share with respect to that litigation. Overall, the changes that staff has proposed here are intended to provide flexibility, to the residents, of course, of Casamira, but also to, generally citywide. This is an extremely challenging area, as you all know, of coastal policy, perhaps the most challenging area regarding issues of coastal erosion and shoreline protection. Staff has met with a number of the speakers this evening to discuss their concerns. And we believe that the policies before you are really designed to strike a balance between this private property planning and at the same time protecting coastal resources. And so for that reason, a few changes have been proposed. A speaker noted that the definition of existing structure was based on guidance from the Coastal Commission that is simply guidance. And we took note to that and actually have removed that definition, which gives some more flexibility to your plan in the event that the formal regulation is adopted that we can turn to in the future. This is a matter of litigation, like I said. It's actually litigation that kind of only indirectly affects the city because the litigation is actually against the Coastal Commission, which denied a permit for a shoreline protective device that would protect the condos. And so that is working its way through the courts. And the city is a part of that litigation because the coastal trail is also within that general area between the condos and the the bluffs there. But at this point, we don't have jurisdiction over that permit, and the question whether we ever would in the future. Though I did want to make that clarification. As far as potential takings liability, someone mentioned that, and I do want to note again, we don't have jurisdiction over this permit, so we're not actually being asked to grant or deny a permit at this time. But just very importantly, the LCP does include the land use plan does include a taking savings clause that is from the Coastal Act, and it ensures that this plan is not administered in a way that would affect the taking of private property. So that is in there, and that provides assurance for the public as well as protection to the city. Let's see. Oh, and I guess also I would just note in terms of the property protection plan, just a clarification that only does come into play if someone applies for a CDP or if a landowner voluntarily wants to prepare one. So secondly, I wanted to touch on the comments that were made with regard to the phasing that has been proposed to be reinstated in the Northwest Wave Crest PD. Obviously, the intent there is to reinstate that with some boundary conditions. And there was comments that the minimum 40 acres may be too small from a planning perspective. That is, the minimum that staff would recommend in terms of allowing for good coherent planning in that area. Also want to note that there are several mentions of old agreements. I've reviewed those. I do not believe those tie the hands of the council in terms of exactly how to design and plan for that area. So that is, and also a comment in terms of planning for lands that one does not own. That is part of the specific plan requirement, and several PDs do have that situation where there's multiple ownership, and the code and the plan, lays out a need to, coordinate with the other owners, but not necessarily get their buy-in. So that is a requirement that has been there and is being carried forward. So that's all I wanted to say, I think, about that piece. Again, where the goal was to reinstate the phasing to provide the flexibility for the owners in the North Wave Crest area.
Great. Thanks, Catherine and Brittany. So for kind of a wrap up on this, we wanted to try to help folks who are new to this with a little more context than we presented earlier in our overview on the areas that seem to be of most interest to them. So from the big picture and from the very beginning of this planning process, the intent has been for this update to address preservation needs, resilience, and sustainability. And we'll talk about how those come through in these different categories. We hear every single meeting on the land use plan update, the passion for the beautiful and ecologically productive and significant open space areas in Half Moon Bay. But what is open space? We just want to remind folks some of the open space is absolutely that. It is owned by land trusts or it is in public ownership. This land use plan brings forward a new land use designation for those areas. It's an open space for conservation designation. It will protect these lands in this designation as a long-term zoning map amendment. It's a color on the map and it's very, very important. Now that said, other areas that are don't appear to be maybe developed actually are. Farming is development. Agricultural uses are development. A lot of these areas are under private ownership, and we need to recognize that. They also have zoning, and we just, in the current plan. So in coming forward with this update, we really took a long, hard look and talked to a lot of stakeholders about the productivity and the ability for a wide range of uses to support ongoing retention of agricultural land uses or potentially even new ones. You heard one speaker tonight who has participated. She is right. She is, Ms. Branscombe has participated in probably every single meeting. And we have really appreciated her time and expertise and oversight of agricultural policies and her feedback. We've also met with the Farm Bureau, the Resource Conservation District, and other agriculture property owners. And what's really significant in this update, there's two things. One is right now, most of these properties are in what are called reserve designations. You heard that reference tonight as well, urban reserve. There's also open space reserve. We're proposing to retire the reserve designations. Reserve means it's been in reserve to possibly be developed someday. There's language about that in the current plan. The new rural coastal land use designation is a really important change for supporting and expanding upon the range of agricultural uses, agricultural compatible uses, and supplemental uses to help our small farms and ag compatible operators make a decent living. It's really hard. Our farms are small and they need to have a range of uses. And at the same time, we have to comply with the Coastal Act. So that focus on soil conservation and other ways of supporting. And we're going to talk about housing in a minute because that's a really important ingredient for them. Circulation, yes, it's really rough. This plan does not shy away from that. It can't solve it. We got to be we're really honest about that in the writing of this document, which is why the land use construction is focused on a town center for concentrating development, should development come forward, and being very practical about where else it would go, especially at the north end of town where the level of service and the amount of congestion and delay is just remarkably higher than the segment to the south. So you will read references to lower intensity uses, for example, in the plan when it comes to that end of town. And the concept for the circulation system and Highway 1 and 92, both of them, is what we have called the town boulevard. These are highways, they're state highways, but the fact of the matter is these are the city's main roads, and they should be comfortable and safe for everybody who lives here to cross as pedestrians, to ride a bike, and be less oriented to just getting through as fast as you can. That there isn't a whole lot of room to do any more than that. And so the focus is on making it safer more than anything else. Make it safer, make it work for everybody. So, and what's good for residents is good for visitors is something that we've really learned a lot in our outreach. The Town Boulevard concept was confirmed by a general plan advisory committee several years ago. It's been brought to City Council many times. It's consistent with the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. And of course, the Planning Commission picked over it very, very carefully. And it relates to this town center where you heard questions tonight about employment centers and opportunities for employment in the planning area. And I would like to just cover a few quickly, noting that some of the comments were really at what I would consider a zoning level. This policy document does not preclude any of the things that you heard were of interest, like smaller spaces for incubator space, things like that. None of those things are precluded there. In fact, really supported. There's a new light industrial category area on Highway 92 that is proposed that could also include live work at a low density. There are some expansions and focus on reinforcing the vibrancy of downtown, heritage downtown. And the shopping centers are also areas where there could be different kinds of infill over time, which could include residential, but could also include employment. We really love the feedback and everybody's interest in more people working remotely. I only bring that up because in San Mateo County, Half Moon Bay has the highest rate of work from home of any other town. And I'm looking forward to seeing the journey to work data in future census updates, because we suspect that it's going to bump up now that we're all getting so good at it. So anyway, we are paying attention to it, and it's going to be helpful to see how that works. Let's talk about housing for a minute. Several speakers brought it up. We heard support for affordable housing. We know it's a city council priority. When we saw you at the end of October 2019 in a joint study session, staff presented the concept of the workforce housing overlay that evening, and it had a capacity for about 200 units. The feedback that we thought we heard was, we like this, we'd like it to have more capacity. We brought you back a tuned workforce housing overlay that has about 300 unit capacity. It has a very small amount for state parks, like 10 units total. That includes their existing units. And then it has a lot of units potentially for the most centrally located site in town, which is one that was brought up tonight, which is the property next to Our Lady of the Pillar Catholic Church. at about 50 units. It's also combined with schools. It's thinking about workforce housing, teacher housing, all of those different categories that you hear about, service worker housing. And then there's the agricultural piece of it. And yes, there's a lot of interest in, well, where should farm worker housing be located? You heard some comments on that tonight as well. What your staff would like to suggest is that it's important to set the table for more than one location. There's several locations that would be good. Ag property owners who don't need a lot of it, they want it on their property. They have an asset that they can't afford to have anywhere else. It's the fact that they own their land. And land cost is one of the biggest burdens in developing affordable housing. So the workforce housing overlay strategy for ag of distributing and matching housing to the operation or to other coastal ag workers, they don't have to work on that particular property. We wanted to suggest a flexibility around that the Planning Commission considered is what we're proposing to you. That doesn't rule out other things that you heard about, like Podesta, which is the largest and really the only PD left in the town center area, which has a policy emphasis on affordable housing in its mix of use and build out. It also has employment opportunities and maybe even something like a use that your community members told staff about, which was, we are very concerned that we cannot age in place here if we don't have assisted living. And so those were some really local, important uses that we tried to think about through that planning.
Jill, may I ask a question real quick? While you pivot? If the people working on the ag affordable housing are not necessarily, they don't need to work on that property, which I'm good. Who and how are they being vetted? Is that city responsibility? Is that responsibility of the landowner? How does that work?
That's a really good question, and it depends on the scale and the circumstances of how it's entitled. So if it's pretty small, the farmers we talk to, if they're going to build it on their own property, it's for their folks. So we wouldn't expect a small scale situation like that to really be for other ag employees. If there was more room and there were going to be more units, there would be deed restriction, at a minimum, a use permit, and then we would build in monitoring. Most affordable housing has annual monitoring with it. And you've got to put that into the entitlement. The city has a role in it. We don't have to do all the work. We do not have a housing shop here. It's, but there's ways to provide that function. So it's a really important question because you can't just build it. You have to make sure that it's working. And we're mindful of that.
Okay.
There were a couple other sites that were mentioned. Let's see here. I'm almost done. We are hoping that folks who are getting to know the plan will discover Chapter 6 and the resource maps, because they are a marvelous improvement over what we've been using. And they raise everyone's level of awareness about habitats as well as special status species and where they are and the communities that they create and how they contribute to the overall Half Moon Bay experience. And there's rules around them that are very, very important. They're Coastal Act required. They're also required by other resource agencies. So a lot of work went into getting all of that coordinated. We also are bringing in acknowledging the natural systems of Half Moon Bay. This city has a lot of water running through it. And it's a big challenge to think through how to deal with drainage over time so that we are taking good care of our water courses and hopefully providing environmental benefits through them, possibly recharging groundwater. And I already mentioned the open space for conservation designation, which is being proposed on some really important city properties that could be used for green infrastructure support. And so there's a whole public works side of this that relates to the natural environment. In wrapping up, we respectfully brought you this plan through the Planning Commission to try to rewrite the story about agriculture. The plan in the book didn't expect agriculture to still be in town at this point in time, and it is. So preservation of agriculture, support for natural resources, protection of the small town character and culture are all things that have been put into this plan in different ways by the different hands that have been working on it. And we hope that you're seeing it. The plan should always reflect the wisdom of the community. And we're eager to continue to get feedback through your process with all these speakers, and it was wonderful to hear them. And then our sincere invitation for Brittany and I will be happy to meet with any of these folks. We can do it on Zoom. We can wear our masks and talk on the sidewalk. We can go have coffee, and we've been doing that, and we don't say no. Sometimes we're really busy, but we'll make it work. And if you want to get caught up, you want to get more involved, it is not too late to be part of this process. So thanks for letting us respond to those comments. If we missed any, we'll go back through and we can be thinking while you're talking, and we'll be able to cover those. Thanks.
Jill, and I'm sure the council can chime in as well, but first of all, I just want to thank you again. And I just want to say how honored I am to be a part of your staff organization and council, because the time and energy you've put into this and the way you've listened to the community and implemented all the different factors into this plan, it's just been an unbelievable amount of work. And you've been dedicated and open and willing to talk to people, and your entire team has just taken this on in such a way that's so collaborative and so open. And you know, not every city is like this. A lot of cities just push things through and they do their thing. And I just your ability to take the time on a project of this size and scope is really kind of admirable. It's an honor to watch it take place, really. So thank you. Good. All right, let's open it up then. Anything else we need to discuss from staff before we open it up for deliberation from council?
Mayor, if I may, I would just want to remind the council of the conflicts procedure that we discussed earlier this evening. And if there are any questions about the maps, we can pull those up on the screen again. But being mindful of if the council wants to discuss and deliberate around a specific PD that's within a council member's 1,000 foot abstention area, I will be advising that council member to turn off their camera. That's how you recuse in our Zoom world while that discussion is ongoing.
Okay. Let's does anybody have any questions? Jill, I see you have got one thing real quick.
There are two things we want to make sure that we can work in when it's the right time. One thing is, if you get to a point in your conversation where you do want to talk about build out numbers, I'm sure that Brittany's been readying herself, so we can get it back around to that. And then the other one is we also want to make sure that we show the final slides that we have in the deck tonight when you're kind of wrapping up, so you can remember what your options are. And if you want to see them sooner, just let us know. We'll put those back up too. And otherwise, we look forward to hearing your discussion.
All right. I will open it up to council and see if anybody's got any questions. I've got a few and I'll wait my turn and we can go through. Mr. Ryback, please start us off.
7 years. That's how long this process has been going. I don't know how many of you can remember our original consultant, but I think we have really, really gone very far. And I want to reiterate what the mayor said about the work that Jill and Brittany have done. It's really remarkable. I want to respond to a few comments that we heard, that this council is only interested in development and maximizing income. I think that's about as far from the truth as I could possibly imagine. I know these council people, and we're all interested in what's in the first chapter of the land use plan, and that is preserving the small town character, the coastal nature, open space. That's on all of our minds. So I take a little umbrage when I hear that we're only interested in development and maximizing income. I absolutely agree that affordable housing in the downtown core is a very, very desirable goal. We heard 3 locations that are potential good sites for affordable housing. I'd be thrilled to have 50 units on any of them. I've been advocating for that for a while, unsuccessfully, but I'm not giving up. We really do need affordable housing. And by that, I mean for extremely low income workers, people who do our work in our hotels and restaurants, and right now can't afford to live in Half Moon Bay. We're losing people left and right, and it's a shame. And I think this land use plan is a step in the right direction. Let's hope we can actually build some real affordable housing. So I'm all in favor of that, and I thank you.
Excellent, good. And I appreciate that comment about everything you just said. Very, very much. I think you're right on the money. Thank you, Harvey. Do you mind if I just go around? Debbie Ruddock, yeah. Councilwoman Ruddock.
I have comments, but no questions. So if you want to go through questions first, that's fine. Otherwise, I have remarks.
Oh, no, let's open it up for all discussion. Yeah, whatever you want, go for it.
So I hear people wanting to make sure that this document is absolutely right. And I've heard the desire to continue to take input. But after talking to staff quite a bit in the last few days and hearing their responses tonight and rereading some of these documents, I'm not going to support all but a minimal delay, maybe 2 weeks instead of the meeting on the October 6th. I think if people want to get together and talk about tweaks, with Jill and Brittany, Bob, I have no problem with that. But I'd like us to, at least by the second meeting of October, move forward. And I just want to reiterate something that Harvey said. I also take umbrage at this notion that somehow this process has been untransparent. This process has been like the most transparent process I've ever been part of. And it's been years in the making. There's been meetings in neighborhoods. There's been meetings at the many years of meetings at the Planning Commission. So I'm not sympathetic to this idea that more time is needed. The Planning Commission has been knocking themselves out in addition to staff, lots of public input. You know, I think we're there except for some tweaks. And I want to also counter this idea that there's no vision here. And I actually think there's a very strong vision here, and the town center is the focus of that. If we want to protect our open spaces, if we want a more sustainable community, if we want to deal with wildfires and climate change and food supply, then you have to concentrate development where it's least impactful. And in the town center concept is laid out by the Planning Commission and our staff, you know, we can serve diverse incomes, we can serve diverse, you know, commercial pursuits. It can all happen there. It can be close to transit, it can generate transit because of the footprint. And it gives us a chance to protect the open spaces that we have. Ideally, I'd like to see all the open spaces between all of our neighborhoods protected as permanent public open space. That costs money because, you know, our job is a balancing act. You can't deprive people of all economic use of their property without paying for it. So short of that, you have to achieve a balance that addresses a myriad of goals. And it's a balancing act. And I think staff has done a really good job of getting us there. Nothing is going to be perfect. There's going to be opportunities when we start looking at zoning to refine those concepts, to make it clear how you can do these things. But the plan as it is, I think, will limit impacts of traffic and environmental impacts north of Highway 92. That's the goal. And, you know, protecting agriculture is a key part of that. You know, people talk about COVID, we got to get, you know, the new COVID, you know, post-COVID program and take into consideration all those effects. I don't know about you, but if I've learned anything from COVID is that, you know, sustainable practices, you know, having local food supply, not having to travel far, you know, for work, being able to work at home, having home occupations, having schools near your neighborhoods, rather than this commuting 2 hours and flying to China to do business and all this stuff. If anything, we have to be more equitable, we have to be more diverse, and we have to be more local. So this plan, you know, takes us in that direction. And it's not going to make everybody happy. But the fact that a lot of people aren't happy and a lot of people are, I think tells me that, you know, we're in a pretty good place. So one thing I'd like to add in terms of text, if staff wouldn't mind looking for places for this. So we talk about biodiversity and we talk about habitat protection and we talk about water quality, but I think what's really important is ecological functioning. It's ecosystem functioning, right? It's all those pieces working together to provide, you know, water quality, flood control, wildfire protection. If nature is working well, then we are more resilient. So I want us to find places, maybe it's in the, you know, the areas we talk about PUDs or agriculture, but the key concept is a functioning natural ecosystem that supports, you know, all of the activities that we do and all of the things that we care about. So I think that's an important concept to highlight. Biodiversity, yes. Habitat protection, yes. But ecosystem functioning, we're talking about projects moving forward. And we are going to be creating those concept plans. How are we dealing with floodplains and creeks? How are we dealing with overwintering monarchs and tree stands? You know, all those things interact. So ecological functioning is really important to me. And that's the only change that I'm actually going to recommend. And you may deal with other things that people come forward with in the next week or so. And that's fine. But I see these as tweaks. I can't imagine transformative changes at this point. It just can't. And that's pretty much, I think, all I have to say. I just want to say thank you to everyone who has put in a lot of labor and love into this process. It's really, you know, amazing to me. And I know it's not as sexy as some other issues, land use planning, kind of boring. I don't find it boring at all, but it lays the foundation for everything that's built on top. So it's actually very, very critically important. And, I totally agree about the affordable housing. Love it in the downtown area. Love finding pieces of it in other areas, because we do have an inclusionary affordable housing ordinance, which I participated in developing, back in the 90s. Very proud of that. So I would say, basically onward and upward. Oh, one more thing is, so relative to business, I know that the various people who've been head of their chambers of commerce have participated in this process. So business has not been cut out of this process by any means. And I know that staff has been doing outreach there. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. And there's been this criticism, oh, the council and staff are only talking to developers and all this stuff. Well, Sierra Club, Committee for Green Foothills are in there every week. So they're talking to environmental groups. They're talking to everybody. Their door is open. So I want to squash this notion that somehow, there's smoke-filled rooms. It's not that. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
No, excellent comments. Thank you. Let's move on to Councilwoman Penrose.
Yeah, I would like to reiterate everything that has been said by each council person before me. I did take umbrage at the comments that this is a council that has been sitting back and twiddling our thumbs while traffic jams occur and refuse in neighborhoods occurs. And we've been sitting here in smoke-filled rooms talking to developers and trying to make money somehow. Well, I live in this town. Every single council person lives in this town. We all moved here for the same reason. We love the beauty of the place. We love the small town appeal of the place. That's why half of our staff now lives in this town. Our city manager has decided to live in this town. We are all devoted to Half Moon Bay and to keeping Half Moon Bay the beautiful, wonderful place that it is. And we have been busting our you-know-whats for months now during the COVID and the CZU fires to try to keep this town safe and try to help the people that are being hurt the most by it with policies that include equity and caring. And we are not alone. We have partnered with every nonprofit in town, with the county, with the state's help. Our staff has been on top of it, and God bless them. They work so hard, and they are understaffed. Because of COVID, we have had to cut back on our staff, and that doesn't mean that our current staff isn't working 3 times as hard. They are. In terms of the general concepts, I like the idea of downtown center affordable housing. I do not have an objection to workforce housing if it's agricultural workforce housing and it's for employees of the agricultural business or people that work in agricultural businesses nearby in town, in Half Moon Bay or on our coast. So I could see something happening at Rocket Farms with 40 units of workforce housing there. I think that's a delightful idea. I have absolutely no interest in building market rate housing at all. I know it's going to be built, and I'm not going to stop it from being built. If somebody owns property, they have the right to build it. I can't take that right away from them. It's not mine to take. But I'm not going to promote it, and I'm not going to work hard for it. I'm going to work hard for workforce housing, for affordable housing, for equity for everyone that lives in Half Moon Bay. And we're all working as hard as we can on the traffic problem. We're not going to solve that problem. We're going to put small fixes into place that are going to make it easier. But part of the problem with the traffic is going to have to be from people who make a decision to change their lifestyle and get out of their cars, to stop taking their kids to schools over the hill. There are all sorts of ways people can contribute to reducing the traffic here. We have a farmer's market. People don't have to go over the hill to shop. We've got local farm produce. We've got wonderful grocery stores here. So I'd like to work with our business community and help them see a way to develop businesses so that people do less leaving of Half Moon Bay to buy goods and services that they need and going over the hill for. I think that's critical. And I think we can do that in conjunction with housing for our downtown, do it in our downtown. I think I don't want to see us delay this process anymore. I think 7 years is plenty of time. If somebody only decided that they wanted to look at the LUP at this stage and haven't been willing to follow the process all along, all the planning sessions, all the community meetings that we've had about it, that's no good reason for us to stop. There's always going to be somebody who didn't take the time to get involved until the last minute, and they're going to want a delay, and I'm unwilling to give them that delay. So that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Excellent. Great comments. Let's move on to Vice Mayor Brownstone.
Thanks. What I've seen in this process is we've been very consistent with a vision that we did incredible amounts of outreach to the public for years. If someone looks at the draft coastal plan and all the comments made to that plan by every interest group imaginable, environmentalists, businesses, developers, to think that we did not take all points of view into consideration, if you look at that list of comments, it's unbelievable. And then if you think about all the time it has taken for staff to go through all those comments, to politely provide responses to all those comments and take them into consideration, not to mention all the work that our planning commission does. So I have not known anybody on this council who is not a advocate of solid environmental policy. I don't know anyone on this council wouldn't even call themselves an environmentalist. So it's amazing to me that there were comments that we were aggressively on the side of development. I would say to any of those folks who think that way, please talk to any developer that they know here and ask them if they think our pace on development is fast and aggressive. I don't think that would be their response. We're about smart, planful, intentional development that makes sense, that aligns with the vision that people have around what kind of character they want this town to look like. And ad nauseum, we've gathered that information. So I think it was, in between the draft, when we submitted the draft to the Coastal Commission, they did ask that we take out a lot of what they considered too much detail. And so they want to see things more concisely stated. So again, I suggest people perhaps go back and look at the draft, and just because that detail wasn't taken out, when Councilwoman Ruddock asked earlier, hey, tell us about the components of implementation. It includes zoning ordinances, includes all the detail about how many square feet you can have building here, what could be done here, what could be done here. None of that has gone away. It's still part of important oversight with implementation. But sometimes you may see some language in the plan that looks a bit concise and, you know, generalized more. And I think that could be a bit confusing if you don't, you know, if you're not looking at both documents and see it, all the detail that was behind it. So I think this is a great plan. I can't imagine a council that is more dedicated to preserving character, for balancing the needs of a community that's incredibly diverse. And, you know, some other interesting, you know, people talk about traffic, you know, someone else mentioned earlier, you know, we should really think about the future of work. A lot of folks might not be commuting as much down the road. You know, working remotely, going to school remotely, that's changing the entire universe of work. And when we get through this COVID, yeah, people can start thinking a lot, you know, I wouldn't be pushing ride sharing right now during COVID because I can understand people's concerns about, yeah, just pick up, you know, anyone you want from the neighborhood and start sharing, and students doing the same. But when we get through this, I think, you know, people will be ride sharing, they'll have much more flexible work schedules. Not everybody, obviously, but a lot of people will. And they say, you know, if you only have 5 to 10% of people sharing rides, the difference that makes in traffic is huge. So I think we can be planful by helping people figure that out. So yeah, I'm actually feeling pretty positive about Half Moon Bay and the city. I don't think we've given in to any interest, whether it's attorneys' letters, whether it's Coastal Commission. We have taken on so many battles and are willing to take on battles to do the right thing. And that's what I've seen in the council. So yeah, I'm ready to move forward. If there's a few things we can, you know, there's a few things I wouldn't mind, you know, discussing perhaps offline without violating any of my vicinity to some of these projects, just to get clarification on a couple of language pieces. So I'm not going to bring any of that up now. I know Jill is quite open to hearing any follow-up from those who wrote letters and have concerns about any language changes, because, you know, I never really heard that from any of the speakers, exactly what were their specific concerns about language that changed and how it was impacting in a way that was going to create some, you know, out of proportion development. I mean, there are a lot of steps to go through in some of these major projects. A lot of steps before we see a shovel turn dirt. So I hope people can trust that process and trust that we've got great folks on the Planning Commission overseeing that, and that we have oversight over the Planning Commission. So appreciate everybody's patience. Thanks to everybody for getting us to this place. I think it's a great achievement and look forward to moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, council members, I think are so right on everything that they've said so far, and I just appreciate the feedback. And I want to go to a couple of different things, and then I want to ask some specific questions as well. But when I first started out on council 4 years ago, the general plan was one of the topics. It was one of the topics Harvey, you and I both ran on. And here we are 4 years later after a lot of work. And we're in the process of moving this forward after, you know, 7 years that this has been done. And the document is a few years outdated from the 20 years ago it was supposed to be worked on. So I appreciate Jill in particular. I brought up some topics along the way with regards to seawall management, and we discussed what we can do to make those changes. We talked about the existing structure definitions. We talked about what we could do to make those changes. There are things that have been changing along the way, day after day, year after year, piece after piece, as we work with different people in the community to understand not only their needs, but our needs and all the different aspects in between. Back to when we first started to run, we met again at the start 4 years ago, and we talked about affordable housing, moving housing to our downtown core. And we kept, year after year, those came back to be the same priorities we've had, even as council has changed slightly during that time period. They're the same values, they're the same pieces, and they're exactly what are in this plan. When Councilwoman Penrose talks about, don't go over the hill, that aspect is, yes, we are trying to move people into our downtown core. I agree with you. Traffic-wise, we want people to be close to the resources that are accessible to them. And this plan has done so much work to address all that stuff. And I'm very appreciative. And I need to read you guys a little piece of the plan if you haven't read it already, because Lenny Roberts made a very smart comment when she talked about the land use and the framework. I'm just going to grab this because I read this huge thing. And the land use framework, this is in regards to the ag land in particular, so people can understand, because I also have a hard time sometimes hearing from constituents that I feel like are maybe misinformed on how this process went about. But in terms of the land use framework, the county's agricultural heritage is evident throughout Half Moon Bay. The city has prioritized the preservation of agricultural uses, which have not converted to urban uses as previously anticipated when the local coastal land use plan was first drafted in 1985. We have made changes. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but we made changes to make ag land work in Half Moon Bay and to keep it for generations to come. And we have offered affordable housing options, as Jill talked about, to make that work so these ag lands can continue in Half Moon Bay, which again is important to every one of these council members, I believe. And back to what everybody else said on that. I have one question real quick, and I'm going to go into some other topics. On page 746, so chapter 746, we talk about our tree and fire danger. And we've kind of outlined the maps that exist now in terms of the fire danger here in Half Moon Bay. What I don't really know entirely yet is what our plan is to deal with that fire danger. And it's a little bit more important to me now as I'm focusing more on emergency preparedness and fires and climate change. And so I love all the definitions and the mapping and the understanding of where the danger is, because I think it's very specifically outlined in our new plan. But I don't necessarily entirely know what our overall plan is for it. And I'm just curious if you can talk to that briefly, or is that something that we're going to be discussing as a council?
So Mayor Eisen, thank you for asking. Brittany answered part of the question earlier with regard to hazard mitigation plans and updating the city's safety element. That said, your land use plan document includes fuel load management policies. For example, policies that would support the grazing programs that we've really been working hard on to protect our neighborhoods, where we have an interface of a lot of vegetation near housing. There is a more significant land use change that's part of this plan as well. The city borders and includes some properties to the east side of the city that are in the extreme fire hazard zone. And we're proposing land use designation amendments to really restrict, as per state law and what is really appropriate developing in those areas. These are areas that are not even supported for housing development by HCD, who really, that's our State Department of Housing and Community Development. That's not where they want to see that development. This is an area where HCD, the Coastal Commission, and I think you would all agree that housing needs to be in inherently safe locations. So there's a number of things here from a land use planning perspective that do address it. You will get more through a safety element update.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay, and then from a affordable housing lens, I could not be more happy with the policies that have been set by not only just this council, but Jill, staff, everybody involved. I believe, you know, we have, I think that in particular, Harvey and Deborah, and sorry if I'm leaving anybody out, have just done such a yeoman's effort, really working for affordable housing in this town. And it is hard to do in a lot of different respects, but this plan allows the policy to exist, and we can build on that with the relationships we've established with our relationships with state and federal and officials that can help us build on the policy we have now created. And I'm very excited for that, for not only affordable housing for the ag land, which is more farm housing, but also for affordable housing, back to what Harvey was saying, for, you know, hotel workers, teachers, who I know have had to move out of Half Moon Bay due to housing. So I just think that it's just very well done, and affordable housing has been a top priority ever since I've been on council, and I think it's fantastically well addressed. Now, all that being said, I agree with council that we have done so much work on this plan, and I'm all about supporting staff and moving forward with the with the caveat that there have been some changes that have come recently. And some of those changes we've had to look at. And so there's a part of me, and I'm curious to know council's thought on this, and, you know, totally open to whatever. There's a part of me that says, is there any thought process to the changes that have come in the past, let's just say, week, and the changes that we've made in the LCP due to those changes, but those things only, and nothing prior, could then be maybe looked at by our commission, our planning commission, again, so they can briefly go through it. I don't think the changes, and I know when I read through the changes, they're not that drastic that it should even require us to necessarily go through this route. But I also want the public to understand that we are going through an open and vetting through the process, and it gives people a little more time to go through it. So I am open to possibly a very quick turnaround of planning commission would get just the changes that are in the LCP. They would look at those changes only. They would get it back to us. It gives the public a little more time on their side. And then at the, what would it be? I think it's the October 17th meeting, we would then do our first, and we would have everything complete by the November meeting to go through the process. And I am open to not having that happen, but I do want to throw it out there as a possibility to slow it down just that slight bit. Councilwoman Ruddock, please.
I'm against that approach. I think, you know, it's totally within the council's authority at this point. Initially, I kind of, you know, wanted to, but the more I reviewed the sort of changes that were being made, the more, the less significant they became, and the more I talked to staff in context. So, you know, I would say maybe one more additional meeting for input, and then the following meeting, the second meeting in October, you know, we adopt.
So that would be, and that would just be a slight change from the current. So you're suggesting maybe instead of the next meeting October 6th to finalize it, we'd meet October 6th to do one more round, and then we do it the second meeting, and nothing with the planning commission, because there's really, the changes are so minor, there's no real reason to put it in front of them.
Yeah, and there's nothing to stop, Jill from consulting with the subcommittee and the planning commission that worked on this stuff. I know that they, have been engaging now for many years together on a regular basis. But I say we keep it here and be ready for adoption at second meeting in October.
Other council members want to weigh in?
I concur.
I concur completely with Council Member Ruddock.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the October 6th date and then finalize on the 20th. And people can send us as many comments as they like to look at. They said people said they wanted more time for comment, and how that comment to the planning commission versus us in our planning department at this point, I don't really see the difference. I mean, the buck stops with us at the end of the day, regardless. So
well, I want to be careful. I want to be
go ahead. I was going to say, people who comment, try to make your comments constructive. We've seen already, millions of emails like, don't develop here. We hear you. We hear you on that one. But if you have, constructive comments pertaining to the text, that you'd like to see changed or tweaked, want to discuss that, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. And really, I mean, at some point, and back to what Jill was saying earlier, and even myself preparing for this meeting today, I feel like we have to cut off the comment time period, whatever it may be. And I'm not sure if we can do that legally, and I might have to look to Catherine for help on that, or maybe Jill, but there's got to be some point at which the comments are now finalized and we can incorporate whatever we need to in still, if any further changes need to be made. But I don't want to continue open comment for forever at this point in terms of changes, because we had so many people contacting us today, and it's like, obviously we can't make those changes as we're preparing for a meeting on top of it. Vice Mayor Brownstone, help me out there. Yeah.
Right. No, I totally agree. And it's also like, we're basically questioning some of the alarmist underlying assumptions that we saw in some of the letters, that because, we received comments in a long letter that we made these drastic changes, were made, and that's really just not the case. So the whole basis for having more time and comments is based on somehow that we made these radical changes. So I question that underlying assumption to begin with, and therefore I think our action's appropriate moving forward.
Okay. Do we need to discuss this further, or are we ready to entertain a motion? And I'm open to both. I just want to just check in.
City Manager Bob Nisbet, do you have any recommendation here?
No, I don't at this point. I think adding one more meeting is a perfectly fine option. That second meeting in October is October 20th. With regard to cutting off comments, I'll let Jill and Catherine maybe weigh in. But since you're adding another meeting, I think that does give you the ability to kind of do that, because you're going to take comment on the 6th, from what I just gathered from your approach. And so you will be taking comments on the 6th, which means Jill's invitation to meet with folks, take comments, clearly goes until the 6th. But if there is a desire to cut off at that point, I think that would be the point to do it. And then you come back on the 20th and do your final deliberation. So I think there is a way to kind of gently cut it off by today announcing that you've added 2 more weeks.
Right. We announced 2 more weeks. I would be open to cutting it off on the 7th. That way, if people brought up comments during the 6th meeting and they needed to still vet it, it's like, and they're kind of communicating back and forth, and, they get some input from council, maybe the end of that day. Councilwoman Ruddock.
Yeah, so I would actually like it to be pretty firmed up by the 6th. So that what we're seeing on the 6th is, any further modifications, take input on that, but that it's limited, pretty much after that. We're looking at what we're going to be taking for adoption on the 20th, kind of.
So maybe we do it on the 5th or the 4th. I don't know if this is worth discussing that much, but maybe it is. But maybe we do it on the 4th, and that way people have a couple of days here, and then maybe Jill can have it firmed up. Councilwoman Penrose.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear what Catherine had to say.
Please.
Yeah, I'll just chime in to say that we, we've always discussed this with the Planning Commission, that we had a firm date in terms of when we wanted all public comment to be in. And, basically gave ourselves a few days to respond to that. And so we can work with staff to make it clear to the public, when we need comments by in order for you to consider them in your deliberations. And Jill, do you want to say anything more to that? But I think that worked pretty well with the Planning Commission.
Good. Can we make sure that that's on our website as soon as you decide what that date is and just very clearly communicated?
Absolutely. I'd like to go ahead and vet our suggestion. It's pragmatic. So if your meeting is the 6th, for comments to make the packet, we need them Thursday. We really need them right away. Then
tomorrow.
Indeed. I keep forgetting that this isn't Tuesday.
It's a Wednesday.
We really do need them. And, we took comments today and processed them, but we're at a point where it's not fair to council to have to get a packet of things so late. Now, that said, if people have more things to put in and they can't make Thursday, we will suggest 5 p.m. on Monday the 5th. That way they get the whole weekend. And then we get a day to take a look at it before we see you on the 6th. And please, folks, earlier is better for you too, because then it goes in the packet, and these hardworking city council people who read all this material want to see it, and it has impact if it goes in their packet. It's really important. We see that with the Planning Commission. We assume that's true with council. So if you're comfortable with Thursday at 5 for your packet and Monday at 5 for us to sweep up the rest, and that's fair. By the way, the other thing we can do, we will keep meeting with people, whether we're after the 6th or not, because it's more of it's for, let's talk about what's in here. You're worried about X. Let's show you how it's addressed. And so all of that can keep going. And we're also, planning ahead for implementation. The kind of input that we get tonight is really informative for that. And we're preparing our work plan for implementing your land use plan. So I hope that is helpful. Your discussion was incredibly helpful for us. We love working with you. We love working with the city attorney's office. Brittany and I recognize that this is one of the most challenging and gratifying projects we've ever had. I've done a lot of stuff, so I can tell you this is really a big deal. And I have a connection with it. I have a very old father, and I toured him through Half Moon Bay when he was visiting. They're from Washington State. And he said, "Wow, Jilly, you can't make another one. Don't screw it up." So, it's not locals. Yeah, you guys got it down, but people get it. People really get it. So anyway, we're happy to be doing this. We'll keep working. Thank you for letting us present so long tonight. There's a lot of detail, and we do want to cover that. So thanks.
Let's polish that gem. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, may we entertain a motion? I think it's time.
Is it a motion to continue the meeting?
Yeah, I think the motion would be to continue the meeting, and we might have to clarify, but my sense would be to continue the meeting to October 6th and then again to October 17th. And maybe Catherine, do you want to walk us through and then also the timeline?
I think you can go ahead and just continue to October 6th.
Okay.
Because at that meeting, then you know, you would have the discretion to continue it to a future date certain.
I move that we continue this meeting until October 6th.
To clarify the motion, it would actually be continuing the public hearing.
Right.
I move that we continue the public hearing until October 6th.
I second.
Excellent. Jessica, will you kindly do the honors?
Yes. Councilmember Reddick,
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose,
Yes.
Councilmember Rohrbeck,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownstone,
Yes.
Mayor Eisen.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
All right, well, excellent discussion this evening. I'm very happy we had this first round of discussion, and we are not following it up with a full city council deck at this point in the evening. So very well done on the special meeting. And I look forward to speaking again on the 6th and continuing this process. I think we've made some great changes along the way to make sure that everybody is getting a little bit of what they need in the process, and also making sure that we're preserving our small town charm and making sure that Half Moon Bay preserves its open space moving forward. Thank you all for joining, and have a great night.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Night.
Right.